And once that announcement's done, you can go ahead and get started. So I'm going to click that right now.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, and I will pass it over to our chair.
Thank you very much. And see, I did magically make my camera work. It was trying to use my laptop camera and my laptop's closed. So explain why it didn't work. So good morning, everyone. Apologies for the delay. It seems like we're having some technical difficulties today, but I think we have enough people to move forward, and hopefully Margaret will be able to join us soon. So before we get started, I want to welcome everyone. I was thinking maybe what we could do is go through and have the committee members introduce themselves, and then I'll run through the housekeeping stuff. So I'll start with myself. I'm Caitlin Carey. I'm the chair of the advisory committee. I'm an institutional representative, and I'm an attorney with Cooley LLP. And Deb, you're right next to me on the screen, so I'll have you introduce yourself, and then I'll just kind of run through the names on the side of our members and call on you, so everyone can kind of go in order.
That sounds great. Thanks so much, Kate. I'm Debbie Cochran, Bureau Chief with the Bureau for Private Postsecondary Education.
Good morning, Deb. It looks like Christina, I have you next on my screen. Christina is muted and maybe not at, maybe she left.
It looks
back to Christina.
Hi, this is Christina. I'm here.
I think we're still having some technical problems with the Bureau staff. So.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. David Weiss, see you on my screen.
Yeah, good morning. This is David Weiss. I'm the CEO of Asher College in Sacramento and an institutional representative.
Thanks, David. Joseph?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Joseph Holt. I'm an institutional representative. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Ember Education.
Thank you. Lee?
Good morning. My name is Lee Farron. I'm an attorney at the Public Law Center, which is a civil legal services organization in Orange County, and I am a consumer member.
Thank you. Melanie?
Hi, I'm Melanie Delgado. I work at the Children's Advocacy Institute at the University of San Diego School of Law, and I'm a consumer advocate member.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see. BPR Barn. I'm not sure who that is. A couple of those. Just gonna go by my list of members.
I wonder if that's Richie.
Like oh, okay. Got it.
Just a guess.
That sounds like a good guess. Let's see. How about Kansan Chu?
Hey, this is Kansan Chu. I'm a public representative from San Jose area.
Thanks, Kansan. Zima?
Morning, Zima Creason, Executive Director of the California Edge Coalition, and I am a former student.
Former student, great, thank you. Okay, sorry, I'm comparing my lists here. So Margaret, I think we're still waiting on. Did I miss anybody? From the if you're a committee member and I didn't call you, can you introduce yourself, because I can't tell who I've cross-referenced here. All right, I guess I did get it. Great. Okay, so welcome everyone to our August Advisory Committee meeting. As I said, I'm Kate Lee Carey. I'm the chair, so I'm going to do a little housekeeping to get started, and then we'll start working on our agenda. So I want to ask that everyone, if you're going to be speaking, that you silence your cell phones and stuff so that we can hear you and that there's no interruption or as you know, we're already having some sound technical difficulties. So anything we can do to make that better. So thank you for that. We'll be running today's meeting according to the Badgley-Keene Meeting Act. Since we're using WebEx, as you know, I'll ask that at any time an advisory committee member wants to say something, that you just identify yourself before you start talking for the recording so that they can tell who has said whatever they're saying during the course of the meeting. And keep yourself muted if you're not talking, again, for all the reasons I just said, to keep our sound recording at its best possible performance. We welcome public comments on the agenda, and we will ask for public comments at each agenda item prior to taking any action. During each of those items, the host moderating the WebEx, who you've already heard a few times today, will activate the Q&A feature and ask anyone who wants to make a comment to indicate that by typing into the chat that I would like to make a comment, and at that point you'll go into the queue. The host will call on individuals who make that comment using the name that shows up on the side. So if you have, for example, BPR Barn, that's what they're going to call Richie. The only, at the time that you're open, the floor is open to you, all 3 minutes to provide your comment. And after that 3 minutes is up, your microphone will be turned off, and you're only allowed to comment once per agenda item. Be aware that the advisory committee in this context, it is not tended to be having a discussion with public commenters or with the Bureau staff. The actions that the advisory committee can take are basically listening to comments and deciding whether or not they're something that should be on a future agenda. So no other action can be taken on public comments during the meeting. Following these guidelines is critical to ensure open meetings rules are followed and to avoid compromising the speaker's goals or the goals of the committee. During agenda item 2, which is the public comments for items not on the agenda, the committee has limited the total public comment period to 30 minutes. So as to not, I don't know that we've ever spent 30 minutes on that agenda item, but the goal is to keep that agenda item to 30 minutes. And for each of the other public comment periods for the agenda items, we're going to try to keep those to a max of 20 minutes for the same reason, obviously, so that we can keep things moving along. Each individual will still have a 3-minute limit, though, just that's a cumulative time period. The department's IT staff will assist with the public comments, which is what we've done in the past, so it should be easy. Please stay on topic and keep your comments to the allotted time or less. If members of the public have a question for the committee or the Bureau as opposed to a comment, please submit questions via email to bppe@dca.cia.gov, which I know you are all familiar with. So with that, housekeeping in order. I do know that there is at least one member, David, who has a cutoff time, and but I talked to Richie, and it looks like we have enough people that even if David has to leave before we're complete, we'll still have a quorum. But if anybody else needs a bathroom break or you have to leave, please just let us know. We can take short breaks for people to get up and stretch, and then we'll come back and we'll try to go through as quickly as we can. We'll see where we are when we start approaching the noon hour and whether or not we should take a break for lunch, or if we're getting close to the end, we'll see where we are. And I think that's it. So unless anybody else has any pressing pre-meeting business, I think we can, we've done our welcomes, we've done our intros, and we have a quorum. So we can proceed with business. Everyone ready?
Kate, just to let you know, this is Margaret. I'm finally
able to get on. Yay! Thank you, Margaret. Margaret, do you want to just do a quick intro of yourself, and then we'll get started?
Hi, this is Margaret Ryder, consumer representative.
Thank you, and my vice chair. So glad you made it. Okay, so next up on the agenda is, as I indicated, item 2, which is public comment on items not on the agenda. So at this point, as I said before, we'll open the floor to comments. Again, you're limited to 3 minutes. And because we're trying to keep this to 30 minutes, we'll do no more than 10 total, because each speaker has 3 minutes. We'll cap it at 10 so that we can keep to that 30 minutes. So, moderator, if you can open the floor for people who want to add anything under this agenda item, now's the
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment for items not on the agenda, please click that icon with a question mark within a square located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. This is the moderator. It appears there are no requests. Oh, I apologize. Someone just submitted a request. Person identified as Mike, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak. I'm going to request to unmute your microphone. When the prompt comes up, please click the unmute me button. So I will be unmuting your microphone now. All right, Mike, and you are unmuted.
Awesome. I would like to request that the committee streamline the application process and amend as necessary the vetting process to allow more timely processing of new applicants for approval to operate, including expedited approval of organizations that are already under the oversight and jurisdiction and are already been designated preferred providers of education and training by multiple state and federal agencies. As an example, those organizations that have obtained a registered apprenticeship status with either the Department of Labor or California's Department of Apprenticeships.
All right, this is the moderator. It appears that was our only request for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the comment. Okay, so moving on to our next agenda item, which is the review and approval of the May 27th Advisory Committee meeting minutes. Does anyone on the committee have any edits or corrections or discussion about the meeting minutes? Sounds like none. Good. We can, moderator, can we open the floor to allow for public comment before we do our motion?
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, this is the moderator, and it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
All right.
Committee members, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, David Weiss.
Thank you, David. Can I have a second?
Second, Kenson Chu.
Thank you, Kenson. So we'll do a vote. Not sure the easiest way to do this. So I'm going to do what I did before and just go through and call people's names because I don't know if there's a better way to identify voters. So I myself vote aye. Kate McCary. David votes aye. Margaret?
Aye.
Thank you. Dima?
Aye.
Thank you. Joseph?
Aye.
Thank you. Lee?
Aye.
Thank you. Melanie?
Aye.
Sorry, I'm going through the top of my list here. Canson?
Aye. Aye.
Did I miss anyone? Right. With that, unanimous consent. Thank you, everybody. The next item on the agenda is remarks by the DCA. So we can open the floor to DCA representative.
Good morning, Chair Lee Carey, Advisory Committee members, Bureau Chief Debbie Cochran, and staff. I'm Carrie Holmes, Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations at the Department of Consumer Affairs. Thank you for allowing me to provide a department update, and thank you to all the members for your ongoing service. DCA is receiving many questions about whether board and committees will be able to meet remotely, to continue to meet remotely. As the law and executive orders stand today, after September 30th, all boards and committees will be required to return to in-person meetings with publicly noticed meeting locations. However, due to ongoing changes in the COVID-19 pandemic, it's possible that the ability to meet remotely will be extended in some capacity. I don't have any concrete news for you today, but DCA will do all it can to assist boards and bureaus to plan safely for in-person meetings and keep you informed of any additional changes to meeting requirements. To combat the spread of COVID-19 and protect vulnerable communities, California is implementing enhanced safety measures for state employees and workers in healthcare settings. State employees must show proof of vaccination or will be subject to regular COVID-19 testing and required to wear appropriate PPE. Advisory committee members must follow these health and safety protocols if they plan to be physically present at a DCA location, whether for a committee meeting or just a quick visit. Members will need to verify vaccination or follow face covering and testing protocols in accordance with that location's requirements. Statewide guidance for the use of face coverings from the California Department of Public Health remains in place unless the local health jurisdiction issues a stricter ordinance tailored for the situation in its community. Many counties have revised public health orders requiring face masks to be worn by both vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals while indoors. We know things are moving quickly and there is a lot of information, both official and unofficial. I encourage all members and the public to visit DCA's COVID-19 webpage for updates and resources on the state's reopening, public health guidance, vaccinator resources, vaccine distribution, and more. As a reminder, 2021 is a mandatory sexual harassment prevention training year. This means all employees and committee members are required to complete the training during this year. Training can be accessed through the Learning Management System, or LMS, which is DCA's training portal. Newly appointed and reappointed committee members are required to attend board member orientation training within a year of appointment or reappointment. The final training of 2021 will be held via WebEx on October 13th, so please take this opportunity. To register, please follow the DCA Board Member Resource Center located at dca.ca.gov and follow the link to the LMS registration. As always, Board and Bureau Relations is here to help. If there's anything we can do to assist, please reach out. This concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Carrie. At this time, we'll open, mute myself in the middle of my sentence. We'll open the floor to public comment regarding the DCA presentation.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, this is the moderator, and it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Thank you. Yes. And thank you, Carrie. All right, so moving on to the next agenda item, we have Bureau Operations Update and Discussion. Just as a reminder, there are, let's see, there's 8, it appears, 9, 10. There's 10 separate sections on this one, so we'll do public comment following each of the agenda subsections to allow people to make public comments. And just again, as I said at the beginning, the idea here is to make a public comment, not to engage in discourse with the staff. So if you have something you'd like to add, please just do it as a comment. And if you have questions, you can email the Bureau with the email address I provided earlier. So with that, I will hand it over to the Bureau to start with the Sunset Review and Alternative Fee Proposal 5A.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I will just preview that we have 2 folks from DCA here today to talk with us about these issues. We have both Greg Pruden and Taylor Schick. So I will turn it over to them.
Good morning. This is Taylor Schick. I am the fiscal officer for the Department of Consumer Affairs. If it's okay, Greg, I'm going to just take and do a brief overview of the alternative fee proposal, or did you want to start with the sunset review?
Up to you. If you prefer going first, that's fine. I think your piece is a little bit longer than mine.
I'll defer to you then. Apologize for jumping the gun there.
All good. Yeah. So Greg Pruden, happy to be with you guys this morning. Appreciate the chair, vice chair, bureau chief, and other staff, as well as the participants that are here today with us for this meeting. Again, my name is Greg Pruden. I'm a legislative manager with the Department of Consumer Affairs, and I'm just going to briefly talk to you about Sunset Review and the Bureau's Sunset Bill, which is Senate Bill 802. I've had the honor of presenting to you guys previously, where we talked in some depth about the Sunset Bill, SB 802, and the specific provisions that are contained in that bill. There hasn't been much change or amendments since my last presentation to you guys, so won't be going through the bill in detail today. Wanted to just give a high-level update of where we stand today. The bill is, today is a big day for the legislature. They are doing their suspense hearings for the Appropriations Committee. Essentially what that means is a process by which they take a deeper dive, if you will, at the spending and the cost of various bills, and make a determination whether to move those bills along the process. So the Bureau Sunset Bill, SB 802, is in the Assembly Appropriations Committee. They will be taking up that bill today. We would expect that bill to move out of the Appropriations Committee today, where it would go to the floor for further action. One of the asks or charges that the advisory committee had made earlier this year was that the department and the Bureau explore the possibility of a general fund avenue, if you will, acquiring some money from the general fund for the Bureau's operations. Taylor is going to speak here in a moment about the fee proposal and the alternative fee proposal that was put together. But I'm here to report that we followed the charge of the advisory committee. We had several internal conversations with various stakeholders, folks in the administration, as well as the legislature about the question or possibility of the general fund. It does not appear at this time today that there is going to be any general fund money coming to the Bureau. As I think is quite known to folks here, the Bureau Sunset Bill has a 1-year sunset extension. So we would expect there to be further substantive conversations around the entirety of the Bureau, but especially around fees and how the Bureau is funded and whether the general fund is something that might be used for the Bureau. We would expect those conversations to happen again next year. But at this point, it does not seem that there will be any general fund money coming to the Bureau this year. And with that, I would be happy to turn it over to Taylor for his presentation on the alternative fee proposal.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Taylor Schick, and I am the Fiscal Officer for the Department of Consumer Affairs. And I'm here to do a brief overview of the alternative fee proposal that is provided in the meeting materials. Just to give a brief overview of the issue that the Bureau is facing is that we have a fund condition, the Bureau's special fund, which supports all their operations, that is projected to become insolvent in this current fiscal year. Right now, we're anticipating having to execute a control section 14 loan. That's just a special way of saying there's a provision within the governor's budget that allows DCA to do loans between our various special funds in the case of cash insolvency. We are anticipating to do a loan to keep the Bureau's operations going for the next 2 years. However, that control section 14 loan does need to be able to be repaid within 24 months. So a little bit about why the Bureau's fund is projected to go insolvent. So the primary driving factor is that we have a structural fund deficit, which means that revenues that are being received by the Bureau are outpaced by their expenditures. Right now that we are anticipating a structural deficit in the current fiscal year of approximately 6.6 million, meaning that we're going to overspend our incoming revenues by that amount. This had been a while coming. The Bureau had contracted for a fee study that was commissioned by the Capital Accounting Partners back in 2019 to review the Bureau's fee structure. Some of the proposed fees recommended by that study raised some concerns, and there was a recommendation that the Bureau conduct a further study and come up with an alternative fee analysis. And in conjunction with the DCA's budget office, which is in my shop, we worked with the Bureau to conduct that alternative fee analysis. One thing I should note is that, again, approximately 90% of the Bureau's revenue is derived from one singular fee, which is the annual institution fee. Most programs are very well aware of this fee. It's a fee that is paid every single year and is based on the revenues that are reported by all institutions for that year. Seeing that it's 90% of the revenue, there's no way we could go forward with not addressing that fee, but we did want to take a look at how that fee was being assessed. So what the budget office did is we used school revenue that was provided by the Bureau from calendar year 2020. That was the last full year of information that could be provided. And we took a look at, several different options that we could go with. We even took a look at what would happen if we charged a straight license fee equal to all institutions across the board and to make up that structural deficit. Unfortunately, when we did that, it looked like we would be charging approximately $20,000 per institution across the board, and that seemed like a non-starter. So we went back to the drawing board and we took a look at, well, how is this fee being really assessed, and how is it best shared across all the various institutions across the Bureau? And what we came out with is that we should be charging an annual base fee to all institutions to essentially recoup the annual cost that the Bureau expends for each institution to do the review of their application, to do a site visit, etc. After we did that study, we determined that a base fee would be approximately $3,500 to all institutions. Once we had that, we took a look at the school volume, saw how much revenue that would bring in, and then we took a look at what would need to be addressed for that annual institution fee. And this alternative fee does recommend an increase. Currently, that annual institution fee is set at 0.55% of the revenue derived from California students. We are proposing to increase that from 0.55% to 0.775%. Additionally, currently, there's a minimum annual institution fee of $2,500. We're proposing to actually reduce that in light of now charging a base fee. We would be reducing that minimum annual institution fee to $1,000. And then the final change to the annual institution fee that we're proposing would be to raise the annual institution fee maximum per location from 60,000 to 80,000. All those items outlined, this alternative fee proposal is estimated to bring in approximately $22.6 million in revenue, which is anticipated to keep the Bureau solvent for the foreseeable future. That being said, it is still a fee model that is based on the profitability and the revenue derived from California institutions, and there is volatility in that. So that's a brief overview, hopefully not too detailed, of the annual institution fee. The other adjustments that we're making in this proposed alternative would be adjusting several of the Bureau's other fees that have not been reassessed since the Bureau's sunrising in 2010. And those fees are detailed in the memo that's provided in the board meeting materials. And I believe those fee changes are estimated to bring in approximately $1.8 million in revenue. That concludes my overview of the fee analysis that was conducted, and I'm happy to address any questions if anyone has any.
Thanks, Taylor. I'll open the floor to the committee for discussion on 5A, which would be the sunset review and alternative fee proposal. So if you are a committee member and you'd like to comment, I think we're probably okay for you just to turn your mic on and speak. But if we start to have overlapping, then we can do hand raising and I will pick you. So, but I'll open the floor now.
Hello, this is Joseph Holt, and I wanted, Taylor, just to clarify one comment that you made regarding the increase from 0.55 to 0.775. You referred to it as being based, the model inherently being based on the profitability and revenue of institutions. But to clarify, there isn't any reference to the profitability, correct? It's a revenue tax regardless of the profitability of an institution. It's a 40% increase in the revenue tax.
That would be correct. I apologize for misspeaking. It's based on revenue.
Thank you.
I had some questions and then a comment. This is going to rely more heavily now on revenue than in the past. And how do you determine revenue? And I guess that includes questions like, how do you know that what's being reported by a school as revenue is accurate? And also, schools make money, earn revenue in various ways besides tuition, such as the sale of books, equipment, lab fees. Some have services to the public for which they charge, like for getting your hair cut or providing a meal if they're doing food preparation as part of their teaching. So I'm wondering, how do you determine whether it's accurate, and how do you, or is there some place where we have identified what revenue means?
So I would actually have to defer a majority of those questions to the Bureau. I believe every institution is required to submit an annual report to the Bureau, which is then reviewed, which would include their financial information for the previous fiscal year. But I would defer sort of the process for what they do to vet those numbers back to the Bureau.
Thanks, Taylor. I'm actually looking to see who is best positioned to answer those questions. Mostly, I believe all the figures that we use are partly collected through our annual reports process, and I believe that they do include all of the revenue types that you just mentioned, Margaret. But I'm just looking for confirmation, and I think if Lisa or Robert is available to confirm that, that would be helpful. One thing I will mention, and because it's a little bit of a detail that that isn't kind of a top line for the revenue discussion and the fee proposal, is that the law currently limits the revenue that we do look at to revenue based on California students. So if a school has a lot of students enrolled in different states, that would not be captured in the revenue figures or in our model. So that is another issue that we have brought up as something that the legislature may want to reconsider. It looks to me like Lisa is trying to speak, but I don't hear her. Do other folks hear her?
No.
No. This is the moderator. Lisa, your microphone is muted if you are trying to speak. I can request to unmute and see if that helps.
I see her little microphone icon looks green, which makes me think she's unmuted, but something's still going wrong. So I can confirm that the statute that for annual reports and what's required does require total gross revenue for, again, those California students. Robert, is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I was just looking at the statute that speaks to annual fees, and it just basically says what you gross revenue. So I assume that would be what the institution determines it's going to be from their financial, from their financial statements at the end of the year.
And I would point out too, for Margaret's understanding, that part of the annual review process is submitting audited financials from the CPA in most cases. So if you're questioning whether or not the financials can be trusted, they are required to be audited. So that's a third-party verification of the financials before they even get to the Bureau.
Thank you. That helps. Just something I think to keep an eye on. If the more heavily we rely on revenue, the more important that they are accurate is. I had another question on the application types. For the application for approval for non-accredited institutions compared to the application for approval for those approved by means of accreditation, the non-accredited institutions, the fee seems to be a little over half of what the estimated associated costs are, or for degree schools, and a little bit less than that for non-degree schools. But for the accredited schools, the application fee seems to be less than 10% of what the estimated costs are. And I was just wondering what the rationale was for that difference.
Taylor, is that one that you want to take?
I can take from a high level, but I think the rationale for keeping it to a lower level was more to do with some of the concerns initially brought about in the way the previous fee study was done. So those estimated costs, estimation of associated costs per application type and all those fees were done by the third-party fee auditor. There was some question about what forms of overhead costs and direct costs they applied to each one of those fees, which raised some concerns both across the Bureau and the department. And I believe the initial reason to keep that one lower is there was concern that estimation of associated costs, especially for the application of approval to operate by means of accreditation, since there is less review required on those, that there was some question on whether or not the estimated associated cost was correct. Beyond that, I would have to defer to the Bureau.
I'm adding just briefly to that, based on our last meeting in a conversation, it was a question that I'd asked, and the staff indicated there was a substantial, was the word used, difference in the labor allocation. In the cost study, they were very close, as Taylor pointed out, but in actual boots on the ground work, there's a substantial difference between them, with a much lower threshold of work for an approval by means of accreditation.
Do we have an estimate? All right, it looks like it's going to be about $10 million more a year. Is that about, in round numbers, is that about what we're talking about? With all the fees and all the, both the fee types and the annual? Just
that would be, yes, from a very rounded perspective, we're looking at the Bureau having collected slightly over 14 million for fiscal year 2021. And with this fee study and the various fee increases being proposed based on the 2020 school information, we are anticipating somewhere in the realm of about 24 million to be brought in by 22-23.
Okay, thank you. And we have an idea how many students we serve. Basically, what I'm getting to is, what will the institutions, how much will they need to increase their prices to their students to pay for the fee increases? We've got $10 million. I'm trying to remember how many students this sector serves. The bottom line, it's always going to be the students that pay for these fee increases. Do we know how many students we serve? Anybody?
I don't have any information on the number of students per institution, unfortunately.
I had a further question and a comment. In the bottom of that first page, there's a footnote 1, and it says that the cost for calculated did not include support and service cost. What exactly is that?
I believe what that is referencing in the previous fee study that was conducted, what they tried to do is tried to calculate the direct costs, the direct workload for, say, touching an application for approval to operate. What are the actual costs of the staff time to actually review and process that? On top of that, we do, there's administrative support, the people that are filing that paper away, the managers overseeing the positions doing the work, their facility costs, et cetera, like that. That would be all those support costs. And then there are potential on some of these fee types to overlay some of the Bureau's enforcement costs. I don't believe that was done for the majority of the application types, but enforcement typically is not supported by a direct fee, and therefore tends to be leveraged onto like an annual renewal fee or an annual institution fee.
And then I had a comment on the student transcript fee, which is proposed to be taken out of the STRIF fund. A couple of comments on that. And one is that the students need not just their transcripts, but if the school closed, they're likely to need documentation to help them provide an full application for STRIF, as well as an application to have their loan discharged if they have a federal student loan to get the closed school discharge. So they're going to need enrollment agreements and loan agreements that are in their file and information about their all kinds of things, especially if there are, in addition to the closed school discharges, there are also discharges for basically fraud or failure to provide the education, things like that. So I'm wondering, when the Bureau is getting transcripts, Well, I don't know whether you're currently, if you get transcripts from the school, if you're actually getting the whole student file or the equivalent or whatever is needed, basically, for it might be needed by students, but if not, I would say that that should be part of the procedure going forward to make sure that if you're going to preserve transcripts, you're also preserving the other documents the student might need to make those claims. And so that would be one comment. And if that's done, then it makes sense that, that there be a fee for that would, the $25 makes sense. It doesn't make quite so much sense if all you're doing is extracting a transcript from the school when there's all these other things that are needed. And the other thing that I have a concern about is the camel's nose type concern about starting to take money from the STRIF fund for something other than refund to students. I'm not one who generally relies on the camel's nose because I figure you can always, stop at the eyes or the ears or someplace else along the camel if you need to. But I think it would be helpful to have some limitation so that it doesn't start to act as the first of many things that people would say, well, we should get that from the STRIF fund. Well, we should get that from the STRIF fund. And so what I would suggest to make sure that that STRIF fund is really there for the students is that there be some sort of limitation on taking money from the STRIF fund for transcripts. And I just throw it out as various possibilities. One would be that the estimate is about, I guess, $270,000 a year, that there be some sort of limit that the average amount taken from the fund be no more than X per year over 5 years. And that X could be, 300,000 or something. So you think, yes, it covers what we're contemplating. Or you could say that if the fund is drawn down to less than X, which could be, 5 million, that then they could not, the Bureau could not take any more money from it for transcripts. Or there could be, let's see, I thought I had, there are various ways it might be done, but I would like to see some sort of limitation to ensure that we don't start just relying too heavily on that. That would be my comment on that particular fee.
I've got to almost disagree. Well, I do disagree with you, Margaret. I mean, the key is that these students get what they need. And if we, put a stop on it, as long as there's, all right, where does the money start coming from then? Otherwise, you're going to have students that can't get transcripts or can't get other documents. I don't think we've ever had a problem with enough money in STRIF, at least not in the last, the time that I can remember, at least the last 10 years or so. There's plenty of money in the STRIF, and it already is triggered to start and stop depending upon how much funds are in there. So, if we're not going to use that money for transcripts and whatnot, where will the money come from once we hit the limits?
I think I probably should explain it a little more clearly. Let's say that you do it by a limitation once the fund drops to a certain amount. My thinking would be that then the Bureau cannot keep collecting money from STRIF until that fund is built up enough so that we're sure that students are not delayed in getting their payments. I think that the Bureau could, if we did it that way, could in essence keep account of how many transcripts and student files they had collected. And then when there was sufficient money in the fund again, could then apply to the fund for that, for those amounts. I just don't want to be a situation where students are having to wait to get their funding. And sometimes, if you get a big school that closes, you can have a giant hit in a very short period of time. So that's
we keep talking about these giant hits, Margaret. They just haven't materialized. I don't even know how much money is in the STRIF, but it's, as I recall, it's overfunded by not overfunded. It's got a few years worth of reserves in there, and it is triggered that if it gets down to below a certain amount, it automatically triggers, to start collecting again. I think right now it's 50 cents a dollar, give or take, or 50 cents per thousand. There's some years we don't, the schools don't collect anything because it's so overfunded. In other years, again, we started it at 50 cents. I agree with you to the premise that we have to make sure that it's funded, but I think it's already I think the mechanisms are already in place for STRIF to stay funded.
I would just say that I think in the recent years that's been true, but you can have partly, when Corinthian hit, I think that we weren't as well positioned as we are now to make sure that students knew what their rights were and were able to apply and so forth. But I think you're right. And if what you are saying is correct, then we would never reach those limits. So it's just like a break for if we reach something that would be extraordinary.
The biggest things that could happen now are the great big online schools that are headquartered out of state. I'm not even sure. Are those out-of-state schools, online out-of-state schools, do they collect STRIF? If I can just get somebody to nod their head, they do? All right, thank you.
And with that, I think we can, unless anybody else has anything else to add about the first agenda item, we do have a STRIF specific section on here. So if there's further discussion about that topic, we can talk about it when we get to that STRIF section as well. Does anyone else on the committee have anything to add on item 5A? All right, then I think we can open the floor to public comment based on item 5A. Moderator?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, this is the moderator. Looks like we do have one request or a couple requests for public comment, so I will go in the order that they are received. We're going to start with a person identified as Angela Perry. Angela, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I'm going to request to unmute your microphone now. All right, Angela, you are unmuted.
Thank you so much, moderator, and thank you so much to all of our advisory committee members, as well as Bureau and DCA staff. My name is Angela Perry. I am an Associate Director of Policy and Advocacy with the Institute for College Access and Success, TICAS. I wanted to first express thanks for both of those updates, as well as earlier comments from DCA. We really, at TICAS, we have supported the Bureau's Sunset Review Bill, SB 802, and will continue to support the Bureau as it goes into sunset review again in 2022. We hope that we will be able to support the Bureau in the priorities that you believe are most important now. I know that the Sunset Review report that we are working with is several years out of date at this point, and some of those priorities may also be out of date, especially given the fact that we have undergone the pandemic in the meantime. So we look forward to supporting the Bureau in figuring out all of those priorities and how we can push forward and figuring out all of those things that we can, the advocacy community can do to be helpful in that. We also, on the fee proposal, I wanted to say that TICAS sincerely appreciates the care and thought that went into the fee proposal, especially because we recognize that the Bureau is in a very difficult fiscal position and trying its best to come up with equitable solutions, especially considering, as was pointed out during this discussion, that the Bureau is not actually raising the fees to the actual cost, but is trying to find ways to make it equitable for institutions so that they aren't overwhelmed by increased costs. So we hope that there will be opportunities going forward to support adequately funding the Bureau, making sure the Bureau has adequate capacity. The last thing that I wanted to note was that we would definitely support policies to protect STRIF. We've definitely made comments in the past, or I have definitely made comments in the past about the importance of preserving STRIF for its purpose, which is to serve and benefit students that have been harmed and wronged.
30 seconds.
So we would definitely support policies that would only come into play in the event of extreme circumstances, but that would protect students so that they would be able to benefit from STRIF even as they benefited from transcripts. So all of that to say, thank you again. Really support all of the amazing work that's being done and appreciate this opportunity to comment.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Mike. Mike, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I'm going to request to unmute your microphone now. All right, Mike, and you are unmuted.
Thanks so much again to the panel. My name is Mike Roberts. I'm the CEO of a nonprofit that has both a Department of Labor and a California registered apprenticeship program, but we have not yet sought approval to operate under the Bppe. And we hope that we can sort of share some of the concerns and some of the innovative changes that we're trying to make that I think we all are in agreement that the state of California, as well as the community colleges, are promoting. As we talk more about non-traditional vocational training and apprenticeships, I think in many cases, these increases in program fees may not only harm students, but they may drive up the cost to employers that are working closely with these innovative programs and that we rely on these innovative providers to provide more tech and healthcare apprenticeships. And again, I heard one of the esteemed members of the panel comment that these costs are always borne by the students. And what we're trying to do is shift more of the investment made by employers onto away from the side of students. And so any increases in costs, again, I think need to be carefully considered because in our case, we actually payroll our students. And so that increases a significant cost in terms of funding already. And so as you consider other ways to fund, I think considering innovative programs and the way that they may structure their businesses to serve employers, as well as protect students by paying them fair and living wages, it's important to consider all of those pieces and not the more traditional higher learning community college four-year degree structure that we see in place on both the public and the private side.
Are we allowed to ask questions of a public commenter?
No, Margaret, we're supposed to limit to receiving comments and then adding to future agenda items if they bring up something that we want to discuss.
Can you just tell me what his name was and what organization he's with?
This is the moderator. Let me go ahead and unmute his microphone again so he can state his name and organization.
Thanks so much. It's Mike Roberts, Roberts, and my organization is Creating Coding Careers. We are a California nonprofit.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Masumi. Masumi, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am requesting to unmute your microphone now. All right, and you are unmuted.
Thank you for receiving this opportunity to listen to my comment and question. So I wrote in the Q&A chat basically my concern that reiterates as a consumer, an adult student seeking advanced education for career advancement in this time of COVID, where there are considerations when looking at large schools, online schools, private schools, nonprofits, all of those things that have been graciously been considered and summarized during this meeting. There seems to be a bias that it's, as the nature of this organization and this meeting, that there is a deficit and it needs to be made up by consumers paying into something. But the data that was being reflected is 2020 data, which I have as a consumer. We're in the middle of something where students are, such as myself, trying to evaluate the cost effectiveness, and there is very poor customer service. Everything is automated, everything is chat. And the thing that came across during the discussions that I'm observing is everything is based on an old model of how to look at fee structure and how the consumer has to absorb it. But what is the data that's being cross-referenced with this audit that has been done to the modern experience of the consumer that has to choose what the consumer needs to do in order to stay relevant in the area of work that they are in? I'm a registered nurse. I'm trying to expand my career options, and I'm also trying to cross over into other industries. And in order to pursue those educational options, fee structures, along with licensure fees, which is not the point of BPPE, but I understand that all of those costs then deter from schools being able to receive the students, and without students, programs are closed. So from a very basic field level, I'm one of the consumers wanting to hear about this fee increase and how it pertains to the Bureau modernizing its practices, providing cost savings. So that aspect of the
30
budget,
seconds.
that aspect of the budget doesn't just get passed on to the consumers. Where's the data to support that the Bureau is changing its practices and making cuts as needed? Thank you for your time.
All right, this is the moderator, and it appears that was our last request for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. And thank you everyone for your public comments. Next item on the agenda is item 5B, which is the update on the IT system project. I'll turn it over to the Bureau.
Great, thank you so much. And I would say yet again for this item as well, we also have DCA. We have Sean O'Connor here to give us our update on the system project.
Thank you. My name is Sean O'Connor. Moderator, just want to do a mic check and make sure you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, committee members, BPPE leadership, staff, and members of the public. My name is Sean O'Connor, and I'm with the DCA Office of Information Services. My role within the department is the Chief of Project Delivery and Administrative Services, but a role that is more pertinent to your organization is I serve as the Project Director on your current business modernization implementation project. So I know that I've presented before this committee before in the past, but it's been a while, so I wanted to provide a little bit of background for those members who might not be as familiar with the Business Modernization Initiative. BPPE has participated in extensive, prior to the project starting, participated in extensive planning activities with the assistance of DCA and the Department of Technology to complete the project approval lifecycle, which is essentially a set of extensive planning steps to make sure that our project scope, our budget, and our schedule is solid before we go off into an implementation project. So that the majority of that work occurred through the periods of 2018 and 2019. Our project actually kicked off into the implementation phase on January 10th, 2020. So that date is January 10th, 2020, as you all might remember, is back when things were relatively normal in the course of doing business. But 2 months into our project, the world kind of changed quite a bit with COVID. So we actually had to switch our project from functioning primarily on-site and interacting with staff to entirely off-site as a result of the coronavirus. We have been able to continue our project successfully, conduct our testing and training efforts remotely, utilizing tools like Microsoft Teams, which is a tool similar to what we are using here to conduct this meeting, to facilitate staff interactions and the like. The Bureau is one of 4 programs that are in this business modernization project. We refer to it as Business Modernization Cohort 1. And the reason that the Bureau is pursuing this along with 4 other programs is that allows us to save on some of the administrative overhead costs that need to be incurred as part of any major reportable project that is going on in California. So we can share and gain efficiencies by having the project, pursuing the project in parallel with other organizations. From a project management methodology perspective, we utilize an incremental agile project management process. Those are kind of software buzzwords, so I'll kind of distill them down into what it means for people who don't think about IT projects all day. The difference between an incremental agile project management process versus what is the other end of the spectrum of that, which is called a waterfall process, is our agile project allows us to identify chunks of the functionality that we want to achieve over the course of a project. So take an 18-month project, for example, identify what we want to accomplish along the way and actually implement systems or components of that system across that 18-month period instead of waiting until the end and deploying everything at the end. So I'll go a little bit, in a few moments, I'll discuss some of the bits of functionality that we have implemented to date. But this approach was a lessons learned that has come out of previous projects led by DCA, where we pursued a waterfall strategy. And one of the challenges you have with that is if you have an 18-month project, you start on it and you don't deploy functionality until the end of it, a lot can happen in 18 months. You know, a global pandemic can happen in 18 months, as was exhibited during our project. Laws can change, regulations can change. Agile project delivery, by definition, allows us to determine what is the best functionality to prioritize strategically for the Bureau, as new business needs arise, what do we want to pivot to and focus on as opposed to being locked into a more rigid structure. And this project management methodology is one that is utilized not only in the public sector, but in the private sector as well. I'll next focus on some of our accomplishments to date specific to the Bureau. So to date, we've implemented 3 major software releases delivering functionality currently being used by BPPE staff. This functionality includes an online non-accredited application for approval, an online consumer complaint form, back office consumer complaint processing, including investigation and discipline processes, and the back office inspection processes. We've also converted data for all of the various sources of investigation, discipline, and inspection data over into the new system so that staff can complete those business processes there, as well as have historical data available to them in the system as well. Now, I just rattled off about 5 major accomplishments, and I just want to mention that for folks who have been involved in these types of IT projects before, you're probably aware of this, but those who maybe don't do this very often, that amount of success and delivery of functionality to date, that represents not only a tremendous amount of work on the IT side, but a tremendous amount of work on the part of BPPE staff. Each of those aspects of functionality that I talked about, the online application for approval, the enforcement functionality, the inspection functionality, the data conversion, that required countless hours of staff input and testing from the BPPE staff, and we could not have done any of that without their support and efforts. Frequently meeting with us on short notice, going through hundreds of rows of legacy data, cleaning up legacy data where we needed to. So I just can't speak highly enough about the dedication that the BPPE staff and the managers and chiefs have shown to this project. And that is one of the, if not the biggest reason, one of the biggest reasons that we've been able to deliver the functionality I described so far to date. I want to focus next on our project budget. So from a project management perspective, one of the challenges that arises on many state IT projects is a state IT project sets a budget, and then inevitably, that budget becomes problematic, unintended things occur, and we have to request additional funds to complete the project. Thankfully, that has not been the case for our project. We've been able to successfully negotiate and keep some of our costs down that we had thought would cost us a bit more. So while we've completed roughly 75% or so to 80% of the functionality to date, just as a rough estimate, we've only expended about 66% of our overall project budget. So we are trending towards coming in under budget during, for this particular project, which is always a good thing for our programs and something we strive to do. Our current activities and project schedule. So we're currently in our last major product increment or software release of the project phase. And the focus of this last release from the Bppe perspective is including bringing in the remaining application types, conversion of the remaining licensing data and application data, as well as bringing in the student tuition recovery fund functionality, both the collection of invoices and the submission of claims. So that work is underway right now and is in progress. And we're currently working with the vendor and the system integrator to identify the completion date of our last product increment so that we can have a solid project end date to march towards, and a plan that achieves what we need to achieve during the project phase. At the conclusion of the project phase, we will transition over into maintenance and operations. At the end of our project, it does not mean it is the end of our ability to continue to improve the system or make changes based on updates to statute or regulations. We have planned for and budgeted for a maintenance and operations budget that will allow us to make those types of changes and improvements, because like all software, based on the feedback from internal users, external users, we may make some changes to what we implemented during the project period to improve upon it and streamline business processes. So those are budgeted for and planned for as well. In my final comments before I close out and open it up to any questions from the committee, I just wanted to thank the Bureau staff for their commitment as well. As I was putting together notes for this update, I considered listing a bunch of the staff who I personally have worked with and other members of my team have worked with, but I felt that it was unfair if I were to have missed out on any of those individuals. But I will just say that licensing, enforcement, admin, the folks who work with us from the Student Tuition Recovery Fund side, all of them have been fantastic to participate with and have been extremely helpful. So I'm very humbled and appreciative of their efforts. I look forward to closing out the project period in the coming months and continuing to work with the Bureau to improve the system during our maintenance and operations phase. That concludes my update. I'd be happy to answer any questions that members of the committee might have.
Thank you very much. Committee members, if anybody has comments or questions for Sean about the update, now's your chance.
I have a few questions, more nuts and bolts type questions. You referenced that you're converting data into the new system, historical data. Can you tell me what kind of historical data you're converting in and how far back it goes?
Certainly. So the vast majority of our data conversion to date aligns with the functionality that we've implemented. So that's another way of saying most of it is enforcement data. We worked with the Bureau staff to convert over enforcement data that existed in the legacy system SAIL, which is a kind of a traditional type of SQL database, as well as information that existed from various spreadsheets that the Bureau was utilizing to track discipline data as well as inspection data. I believe off the top of my head, we may have applied a filter on complaint data, but I know we brought over quite a bit of that. So I don't know off the top of my head if we cut it off at a particular time or if we brought over all complaints, for example, that existed in the database system. I can follow up on that. I think that my recollection is that we really didn't filter out anything and that we brought over anything that was existing. I can tell you for certainly in the discipline spreadsheets, in the inspection spreadsheets. I know as my memory is being jogged, I believe on the discipline content that we brought over, we went for closed cases that went pretty far back. We're talking probably 7 or so years at the minimum. I think we went back even further than that. So I would be happy to follow up on the specifics of that, share that with folks, and bring that back to the committee.
I would appreciate that because SAIL was used for quite some time, even before this agency was stood up in 2010. I think it was used by the prior agency, which was the council. And in for-profit schools, where there are problem schools, one finds that the same individual's names pop up again and again, maybe for a different school, but the same people that are problematic don't necessarily go away, and it's helpful to have those records going back as far as possible. So the agency, the council, was first was first set up, I believe, in about 1990, and I don't know when SAIL was first used, but I think it goes pretty far back into that period. So there are records going back quite a way. So I'd be very interested to know what records and how far back, if you could update us on that. I think that would be a crucial bit of information. I have a couple of other nuts and bolts kind of thing. We had raised last time about how accessible information will be to prospective students. And one of the questions is, suppose a student is interested in taking a particular kind of training, what will they be able to find out online at the Bureau website about where that training is offered and how that how schools rate as far as placement in that field? So for example, if you could maybe walk me through, if a student is interested in studying, let's just say cosmetology, and they go onto the Bureau website, what will they be able to find out under this new system about where to get that and how well schools are rated in providing that, which schools offer it, what the cost is, things like that?
So I believe, based on the current requirements that we pursued with the project, that the in the licensed lookup portion that we would have for each school a list of the program information that is available at that particular school. I don't believe that a ratings in that display was identified in the requirements from what I can recall of that. So I don't believe that that is something that was identified in our project scope, but the ability for students to look up a particular institution, ensure that the institution or branch or satellite is current and active, and what programs that that institution offers would be available to the public.
Yeah, that kind of assumes the student already knows where to look. What I'm asking is, the student doesn't know one school from another, and they're interested in cosmetology. Can they look up on the Bureau website, the new Bureau website that will be attached to this, the program or the field, and that will then pop up and populate with schools that offer that kind of program?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So to start from a starting point of, I know what program I'm interested in, let me go and put this in the website and see which active schools or whatever pop up in my area. Yes, I'll double check, but I think that is something that we had, that is functionality that we had incorporated into the licensed lookup feature that we are implementing as part of our last product increment.
That would be very helpful to know, because I understand that the system is using zip codes to identify the programs, but students aren't, or prospective students aren't going to know one zip code from another. And they're really going to be looking at, like, gee, I'm really interested in, working in the dentistry or medical field, or, whatever it may be. And that would be very helpful if they can go from that, from the student perspective, and figure out, who offers it. And even more helpful if then at some point, and maybe it's not done right away, but at some point then the data on the placement rates from the student fact sheet are attached to that, so they can then see, oh, here's 10 schools that offer this, and here's the 3 that have the highest placement rates. So let me start looking at them. I think that's really crucial if it's going to really serve the public. And then another question I had is, do you know at this point, we had talked about non-jurisdictional complaints and wanting to have a better sense of where those are going or why they're non-jurisdictional. Are there categories now that one could look up, again, member of the public, and look up non-jurisdictional complaints or complaints and find, okay, here's, X number of non-jurisdictional complaints, and here are the reasons they were non-jurisdictional. So for example, this is, has to do with flight schools, which are not covered, or, whatever the reason is, or if not for the public, at least for the advisory committee.
So the ability to flag a complaint as non-jurisdictional in the processing of it and the details regarding the allegations associated with that complaint, the system can definitely do that. As far as the data analysis that you're talking about and whether it's appropriate, because I know some complaint data by law can't be shared with the public, but you know, to the extent that the data is input in the system, then I think that we would be able to pull that out and share those statistics with the advisory committee. My recommendation would be to work with some of the enforcement staff at the Bureau to identify specifically what statistics you would be interested in, and then they could work with us to get those data extracts and share that information with the Bureau, with the advisory committee, I should say.
Right. I think it would be helpful then going forward if we could have a sense of where the Bureau is intending to, or how the Bureau is intending to break out, say, categories. We've talked often in this committee about how the categories are in the old system are just not specific enough to be very helpful. So I think it would be helpful in the future meeting if we could have a presentation about the categories into which they will be able to divide non-jurisdictional complaints or ones that are deemed not substantiated, so that we could have more specificity as to why they're not substantiated, as in, you know, they didn't have any evidence or whatever the reason was. So maybe that's something for a future presentation on the IT system. Thanks very much.
If I could just jump in here really quickly, this is Debbie. You know, I think this is definitely part of an ongoing conversation. I know questions have been raised about this in the past, and just want to flag, I think we'll have a little bit more to say in the complaint report readout later in the discussion. But again, still think this will need to continue being a discussion item.
Thanks, Deb. Does anyone else have any questions about the IT system project from the committee? All right, then. Thanks so much, Sean. And with that, I will open the floor to public comments, specifically on item 5B, the IT system project. Again, reminder, this is for public comment, not for questions. If you have questions, you can send them to the Bureau's email address. But for now, if you have a comment, please feel free to notify the moderator.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on agenda item 5B, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, it looks like we do have one individual who has requested public comment, individual identified as Angela Perry. Angela, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak in a 30-second warning. I'm going to request to unmute your microphone now. All right, and you are unmuted.
Thank you so much, moderator, and thank you so much for that update on the IT system project. Wanted to say that we, the advocate community, and I know the public at large, students in general, are very eager to have better data for the Bureau, and really looking forward to the opportunity to have some of that data be reported publicly. I know that later we will have a discussion about AB 1340 and the data that will be collected on wage and employment. But just to piggyback off of the conversation that was happening right at the end of this discussion, where Vice Chair Ryder was pointing out that it would be good to think about the categories and the breakouts that would be helpful both to the Bureau and to the Advisory Committee. It would also be helpful to think about how those categories may overlap with 1340, and how all of that data overlaps with the cradle to career data system that was passed in this year's budget and that will be developed over the next several years. And if there are opportunities for us to be helpful as that gets off the ground and as we have those discussions, just really look forward to the opportunity to be helpful. So with that, thank you again for that discussion. Really look forward to thoughts on how to break out that data and what data is most important to look at. And looking forward to the day when we really do have this IT system up and running. That's going to be wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, this is the moderator. It appears that was our only request for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel at this point?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
All right.
All right, the next item on the agenda is item 5C relating to the ACICS situation. So item 5C, turn it over to the Bureau.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Robert Bales. I am Chief over the Quality of Education Unit and the Annual Reports Unit. And I'm going to talk to you this morning a little bit about ACICS. I'm actually on page 23 in the packet. There's some information that we kind of put together for the committee. As most of you probably are already aware, on June 3rd of this year, the U.S. Department of Education announced that it was ending recognition of the Accrediting Commission or Accrediting Council for Independent Colleges and Schools, ACICS. And as you know, ACICS is currently appealing the department's decision. Should ACICS lose the appeal, the department will allow ACICS schools to continue to receive Title IV funds for 18 months while pursuing a different accreditor. The impact for BPPE, we have approximately 20 institutions that are either approved to operate or registered as an out-of-state institution, or they're in the process of seeking accreditation as a provisionally approved school. Collective enrollment, approximately 9,000 students. So what we've done is we've kind of sorted the category of institutions into 5 buckets rather, and you can see that in the chart. We have some schools that have full approval, which means they are not approved by means of their accreditation. We don't really have a big concern for these schools because the law doesn't require these schools to be accredited, and the lack of their accreditation will not impact their approval with the Bureau. The second bucket of schools are schools that have full approval, so not by means of accreditation. Because the law requires degree granting institutions in California to be accredited, these schools will have to find a new accrediting agency or will have to surrender their degree programs. The third bucket of schools are schools that are degree granting and they are approved by means of their accreditation. These schools will have to find a new accrediting agency and potentially apply for a approval that's not by means of accreditation. And then the fourth bucket are degree granting schools that are currently seeking accreditation. These are schools that I'll speak to in a few sections here. But these schools basically have a limited time to achieve accreditation. And so if they're pursuing accreditation with ACICS, obviously they'll have to select another accreditor and pursue accreditation with with that accreditor. And the final bucket are the out-of-state schools registered with BPPE. If these schools were to lose accreditation, they are no longer able to register to operate in California because accreditation is one of the requirements to register. So, we're still kind of in a holding pattern. We're waiting for the decision of the appeal, which could go either way. We have letters drafted to schools in all these different categories, basically ready to go out to the schools should ACICS lose its appeal.
I had some questions if I could ask about this. This is Margaret. Yeah, ACICS was initially lost its accreditation, or was recommended to have lost its accreditation back, I think, more than 8 years ago. And then that was appealed and it was reinstated, and then here they are back again. And I was just looking, I had sort of forgotten this, but there is apparently an article in USA Today last year, which, I don't know if it's true or not, but reporting that they had approved a school in South Dakota that had no faculty, no staff, etc. And this was in, I don't know when they approved it, the article was in 2020. A lot of schools that had ACICS accreditation have researched elsewhere and become accredited elsewhere, which suggests to me that those 20 schools, or some portion of them, may be having difficulty finding somebody else, maybe searching, but having difficulty finding anybody else who's willing to accredit them, because ACICS does have the reputation of having been very lax in its accreditation approvals of schools. So it would seem to me that there ought to be some sort of, and I don't know if it fits any of our specific priority categories, but priority in taking a look at those 20 schools, whether or not ACICS is reinstated or not, as to whether those schools are having problems, so that we can have an eye on it before it would all come to a head later on. So I don't know if the Bureau is doing anything along those lines, or if it can tell us if it is, but I hope that the Bureau is taking a closer look at those schools that are still with ACICS.
That's a great point, Margaret, and that is the precise reason that we started the process early with identifying the schools, looking at their discipline history, getting an idea for how many students they have, what programs they offer. In the event that this does happen again, like it did back in 2016, some of the schools that were in this situation in 2016 did go on to choose another accreditor and became accredited with that accreditor. But there are a small handful of schools that either went back to ACICS, they dropped that accreditor, went back to ACICS, or they just kind of waited it out and stayed with ACICS. So we're on top of it. We have regular meetings where we get together as chiefs and discuss each school and the implications and what we're kind of prepared to do. But again, we have to wait till the hammer is dropped, or not dropped, so to speak, and the decision is made by the decision is made regarding ACICS's future.
Thanks, Robert. Does anybody else on the committee have any questions or discussion regarding ACICS?
I'm sorry, I was just going to say one more thing. I don't think if the school is violating California law, even if they are accredited, that you have to wait until the accreditor drops the hammer. They don't have just carte blanche approval if they're in violation of the law. So I appreciate you looking at these schools and keeping an eye on them and stuff. But if there's violations there, I don't think we need to be waiting to take action to deal with those violations. So that's what I'm saying is, yes, I'm glad you're keeping an eye on them to see what's going to happen, but given ACICS history, I think one needs to be looking to see if there are violations going on that need to be dealt with by the Bureau, not just waiting for an accreditor or for the department to have their decision upheld or not. That's what I was trying to add to what you had said. So I appreciate you're keeping tabs on them, but I hope we will be proactive if needed where there are violations.
Absolutely, and I apologize if I didn't include that, but it's not just the monitoring we're doing. Obviously, we're looking at their discipline history, their compliance inspection results, and all those other factors, and kind of determining what risk, if any, the school is. Now, if they already have violations or they already have issues, we would treat them no different than any other school, in that they would go through the disciplinary process.
Great. I was hopeful that you would clarify that, and yes, that you would be taking a closer look to make sure that you find if there are problems. So I appreciate that.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Robert. I'm sure we'll be seeing you again in line item E. So with that, I'll open the floor to public comment on item 5C specifically. Moderator, if you can open the floor, thank you.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on agenda item 5C, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
All right, the Q&A panel is now closed.
Thank you. So on to next agenda item, which is 5D, annual report update.
So I didn't provide any specific statistics this go around because there wasn't really a lot to talk about. But I did want to mention a few things. The portal, the 2020 annual report portal did open August 2nd, and it closes December 1st. And as of this morning, we had 16 reports, annual reports that have been submitted, not yet reviewed, but submitted. But I wanted to talk about something else. Our school performance fact sheet workshops, which were very popular back when back when Marcus was here, going to different locations throughout California and providing them. So we've taken a look at the workshops. We've looked at the feedback that we've garnered from those workshops over the last couple of years, and we've kind of modified the content, and we have been offering them online. So so far we've had 4 workshops with 446 attendees, and we have 3 scheduled for the future, one for September 17th, one for October 12th, and one for November 17th. And you can find the information on the Bureau's website on the landing page. If you go to the very top, there's a statement that says the School Performance Fact Sheet Workshop is now hosted online, and there's an upcoming dates section. If you click on that, you'll get information on the dates that I just told you about and information on how to register. So the registration process has changed. The School Performance Fact Sheet Workshop has changed. And we've got some really, really good feedback from the attendees. And so we're going to continue to offer those. We're also working on getting a recorded version so that folks can access it and view it whenever they want. If they're interested in just certain sections, they can kind of use the feature that you can fast forward and re-review content. So we're working on that. I don't have a timeline yet, but I imagine it won't be too long before we can put that up.
Robert, I tried to get onto one of these things that you have on the website for schools, and it required you to enter your school ID number. Is there a way that you can make it available to advisory committee members to get onto any of these online workshops to educate ourselves?
That's a great question. I'll have to check into that, which I will do.
Okay, I would appreciate it very much. I would very much like to sit in on one of them.
Sure, absolutely.
Anyone else from the committee have any questions or discussion about the annual reports? And Robert, you might have said this and I missed it, but just so people understand that the reporting period goes from August to December. So the fact that you have so few is just a testament to the fact that it just opened, and schools have until December to upload their annual reports. And I'm assuming the vast majority of the schools wait until the December deadline to get all that information in. So
Unfortunately, that's semi-correct. Yeah, we typically in the first month that the portal is open, we'll get kind of a handful of schools, and then the second month we'll get quite a few more. Most schools we find wait until the last month, and some to the last minute before they submit. So that number gets incrementally larger as we get closer to the deadline.
Right. Okay, so I think that we don't have any further comments from the committee on this agenda item, so we can open the floor to public comment. Moderator on item 5D.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A panel for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this agenda item, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Our star, Robert Bales, I believe, will be covering the next item as well, which is item 5E, Quality of Education Report.
Thank you, Kate. So we're looking at page 27 of the report. And just to remind the committee, the Quality of Education Unit, the education specialist review most of the licensing applications that come through the full approval and the renewal applications. We look at the quality of education, the educational programs, faculty qualifications in those areas. We also review almost all change of educational objectives and change in method of delivery applications. So the chart that you see is just kind of a snapshot of the last fiscal year. We processed or completed 28 renewals, 38 approvals to operate, 43 change in educational objectives, and 117 changes in method of delivery. Now, typically, that number is the smallest number on the chart. So it gives you an idea of where, of how many schools out there are switching to online delivery. So we processed a total of 226 applications last year. The next chart is the typical chart that I show for every meeting on page 28. These are the institutions that were first identified in 2014 as having degree programs but not accredited. And this is the status of those institutions. Of specific note are the 7 schools that are still on extension to become accredited. They are working toward accreditation. July 1st of 2022, as it stands right now, is their final deadline with a maximum of extension, including the maximum extension of 2 years. The next chart is a different bucket of 1247 schools. These are provisionally approved institutions. These schools are approved to offer a maximum of 2 degree programs while they're seeking accreditation. So again, of note are the 32 that are pursuing accreditation right now. These schools are in some form of pursuit of accreditation. Either they were just approved recently or they're close to becoming accredited. And then you could see by the chart, what's occurred with all of the other schools that have started that process since January 1st of 2015. We've had 65 institutions so far become provisionally approved. The next chart is a depiction of all of our 1247 schools the initial bucket of schools, including the provisionally approved schools and the accreditors that they have chosen. I've shown this before. There's probably a little bit of an update to it since last time, but the schools that are at the top of the list are still the same schools that have been at the top of the list. So with WASC, TRACS, and DIAC being the top three institutions that these schools are choosing. And then the final slide is a snapshot of all of the Bureau's degree granting schools and who they are accredited with. And this, to note, this doesn't include all accredited institutions because we have some institutions who are accredited but don't offer degree programs. And our NACAS schools, NACAS is at the bottom of the list. But if I ran this same query on all of our schools, NACAS would be closer to the top, just because they have a lot of barbering and cosmetology schools that are accredited through NACAS. So I wanted to ask the committee, these are slides and information that I provide regularly, but I wanted to ask the committee if there was any other information that you thought was valuable, or if you thought that this information that I provide, at every meeting is valuable, or do you still want me to provide it? What kind of information would you like me to share about the Quality of Education Unit or about these schools that are pursuing accreditation?
I appreciate especially that last chart. I think that's very helpful for us to know. And it would be great if we could also have a chart showing the non-degree schools and who accredits them. As the number of schools in the transitional programs decreases, it's probably not necessary to my mind that you report on how many are going to which accreditor each time we have a meeting, but I think it's fine if it's not too much trouble, and I gather it's not too much because there's not too much change in it. But I think if you could add in the accreditation of the non-degree schools, that would be terrific. Thanks, Robert.
Sure, I can do that.
Two quick suggestions, Robert. Maybe making sure that you disaggregate the senior and junior commissions of WASC, as you had in an earlier table. That last table separate WASC, UC, and ACCJC. And then maybe a subset list of schools that are on either probation or show cause. Obviously a super small number, but if there are any accredited schools that are on some form of disciplinary action or disciplinary status from their accreditor.
I think that's a great idea. I second it.
The only other thing I might add, Robert, can you guys hear me okay? I switched my mics because someone said I was too low. So, okay, good. Robert, if since for the non-accredited institutions that have to go through the education quality review as part of their application process, it might be if you could just kind of give us an update in future meetings about how long that process is taking, because I know the licensing unit kind of talks about the full, soup to nuts kind of review, but it would be interesting to find out from you how long that piece of the review is taking, just generally speaking, because I know the institutions that have to go through the full process for approval is markedly longer than the accredited institution, so it would be good to be able to kind of get a sense of that.
Sure, I could provide that next meeting.
Okay, anybody else have any discussion or questions for Robert about item 5E? Okay, thanks, Robert. With that, we will open the floor to public comment on item 5E, quality of education.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A panel for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on agenda item 5E, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right. This is the moderator. It appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay. What time is it? 1:45. So I'm going to make a suggestion, and we can see how it goes. But it is already 11:45. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bureau updates left. Is everybody okay to power through those next 5 and then we'll take a break? Or would you guys like to take a quick 5 minutes now and come back?
5 minutes now would be nice.
I'm sorry, Margaret, did you say a quick break now?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. All right, so why don't we do that? Why don't we take just, let's see, it's 11:47. Why don't we come back at 11:55? So you have 8 minutes. Go grab your next cup of coffee, and we'll be back here in 8 minutes, and then we'll just power through as long as we can until people get hungry. So thanks, everybody. See you in a few minutes.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll return at 11:55.
Hi, everybody. This is Kate. It's 11:55, but because Margaret left her camera on, there she is. I was going to say, I know we're waiting on Margaret, but she's way ahead of me. I just want to do a quick, just make sure that everybody is back before we get started again. I see Joseph. I see Margaret. I see Melanie. Sorry, scrolling through my peeps here. David Weiss, are you there? All right, waiting on David. Canson?
I'm here.
Thanks, David. Canson Chu, are you back? And what about Lee? Zima?
I'm here.
Thank you. All right, so I think we're waiting on Lee and Hanson to come back.
Back. This is Canson. Hello. I'm back.
Thanks, Canson. Gotcha.
Thank you.
Lee? We're still waiting on Lee. But I think based on who we have, we can get started and Lee can join us when she gets back. We still have a quorum, so should be okay.
I'm here. Just not my video on yet.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, everybody's back. So that brings us to our next agenda item, which is 5F, Compliance and Discipline Report. Open the floor up to Bureau to present on this item.
Great, thank you. This is Debbie. Just before this next report, I wanted to share some staffing changes at the Bureau. Beth Scott, who has previously led our compliance and discipline divisions, has retired. So Jason Alley has stepped in to fill this role until we find a permanent replacement. For today's meeting, we've got managers Michelle Alliger and Cristina Villanueva to report on compliance and discipline. So I'll turn it over to them.
All right, thanks, Deb. And please tell Beth we said congratulations.
Hi, good morning. I'm Michelle Alliger, one of the compliance managers at the Bureau. I'm on page 33, and as of July 29th, we have completed a total of 95 inspections. Of those 95 inspections, 54 were announced and 41 were unannounced. Our compliance inspectors have issued 12 notice to complies and have generated 32 enforcement referrals. And we've also had 7 inspections cancel as of July 29th. We are back out there, obviously, inspecting our schools. And we're excited to get back out there again. Is there any questions?
Yeah, can you give us go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Can you give us an idea on what the referrals were and what the findings were?
A lot of the enforcement, most of them were from we went out to inspect the school and they weren't there for us to inspect. So, you know, we're still running into that issue, and we're issuing enforcement referrals for those.
Is that most likely due to COVID? They're just being remote?
I can assume so. A lot of schools have gone to distance ed, as Robert indicated earlier, and so they aren't at the locations. But now that we're able to get back out there since June, we are able to call the schools and ask them where they are. So I think COVID has a part to play in it, yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have any questions for Michelle about her portion of the report? Was Christina gonna?
I'm sorry. I just have a quick question. I was just curious. Is you have one listed as you didn't have you had to cancel it because the school wasn't at the physical location listed in sale. Were they somewhere else?
Where are you referring?
That's in the notes. The causes for cancellation number 4.
Correct. They weren't at the physical location listed in sale. That could be one of the reasons why an inspection was canceled.
Were they somewhere else? Or they just didn't exist anymore?
Well, if they didn't exist anymore, that would have been closed, would have been canceled due to they were closed. So we have the school closed during the inspection, school surrendered approval. I'm sorry, just reading this really quick. They could have closed, they could have moved locations, they could have put the distance ed not at
12:30
location.
Pacific. I have a call tomorrow as we drive across.
Hey,
Sorry.
David, you need to mute yourself, please.
Where was I now? So they could not be at the location instructing, but doing online courses, so they weren't at the location.
Right. I was just wondering if you knew specifically, but you're not the one who dealt with it directly, I gather. So that's okay.
Okay.
I had one question. I know you mentioned that you started back with physical, in-person inspections in June. Do you have any sense at this point if that's going to change going forward, considering Delta and other folks, kind of reopening and shutting down again and that sort of thing?
As far as I know, we are, I mean, obviously anything could change.
Anything can happen, true.
Yes. We're just we just wait for direction, but continue on as status quo until we hear differently.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Is there anything else on item F? Michelle, is that it, whether it's the Romanettes 1, 2, or 3, or was that part of Christina's presentation?
That's part of Christina's.
Okay. All right, well, so we're still in agenda item F, 5F, so I think we can go through all 3 of those sections before we open to public comment. So I will I'll let you guys continue.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I'll be presenting on the discipline highlights, so that includes the citations and fines. So our statistics pretty much speak for themselves, but I will go through it fairly quickly. If you have questions, you can stop me along the way. So I am looking at page 35 and our statement of issues. We're pretty status quo right now as we were last year. We've had 1 proposed decision where they upheld our denial, 2 withdrawn where they mitigated the licensing app and ended up getting approved. 1 withdrawn, we upheld their denial, and then 2 became exempt through the process. And for accusations, same thing. It's been fairly quiet early part of this year. It's starting to pick up, but according to the stats, we have 2 institutions that have defaulted and didn't respond to us, so they've been revoked. 1 case rejected by the DAG. 2 of them surrendered their license or their approval to operate. We haven't had any automatic suspensions this year, no emergency decisions thus far. So our accusations caseload statement of issues is pretty low right now, but it is starting to pick up. Any questions on those 2 before I move on to citations?
I assume you can't tell me specifically the reasons that the accusation was denied by the DAG, but can you just tell me generally whether it was some kind of a procedural issue or a factual issue?
A little bit more of just needing additional evidence. They felt to strengthen the case, we needed to go back and ask a few additional questions.
Okay, so it wasn't, I mean, so you still could go back with that if you get more
yes,
evidence.
yeah, so any case that we get back from the AG's office and they've rejected it, we typically will go ahead and pursue additional investigation on it. So usually it goes back to the investigations unit to go ahead and gather a few more documents or a few more witnesses that they may need in order for us to go ahead and have a stronger case when we go forward to the AG's office.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on those 2 before I do citations? Okay. So for citations, at this point of the year, we're at 123 issued. Number of schools cited is 123, so pretty exact. And as inspections have started up again, investigations is kind of up. Now that schools are reopened, we are starting to see an influx of referrals for, like Michelle was saying previously, for schools that weren't present for an inspection. They had moved, they just weren't there, they closed down, so a lot of improper school closures. Some just not reporting to us that they went distance education. They don't have a physical location, things of that nature. We are getting a lot too during COVID where STRIF wasn't submitted, annual fees weren't submitted, so a lot of those citations are coming through for that. And again, investigations is back up, so when they are completing their investigations now, we're getting some more referrals. So I would anticipate the number of citations going up, in at least meeting last year's number, if not more.
Do your charts on this include inspections? I'm sorry, this isn't inspections. Yeah, do your charts include inspections of distance learning schools?
My particular charts, no.
No, I'm sorry, that was the wrong person. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I believe that would be Michelle. Answer that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, a little bit out of order here. What in your statistics on inspections, does that include inspections of distance education?
Yes. We do, for distance ed schools, we go to the administrative location or wherever their physical location is. And we have been coming across a lot lately that are distance ed.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions regarding the citation statistics? Okay, that's all that I have to report at this time, and we're just kind of plugging along as schools are reopening and continuing to stay on top of any referrals we're getting. And that's pretty much all I have at this point. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to the next section, which I believe is complaint and investigations.
Thanks, Christina.
Oh, sorry, you need public comment.
Yes, every single time.
Yes, I remember.
Yes, so thank you both for your presentation. And with that, if there's nothing else from the committee, we can open the floor to public comment on item 5F, Compliance and Discipline Report.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A panel for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on agenda item 5F, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next agenda item, which is 5G, Complaint and Investigation Report. I will open the floor to the Bureau for that one.
Great, thank you. I'm going to just give a little bit of an introduction on this one as well. Here too, we also have some staffing changes to share. Beth Danielson, who was previously over complaints and investigations, has moved on to another role. We've got Clarissa Serrato Chavez, who's a longtime manager in this area at Bppe, who's stepping in to fill this role temporarily. And she's joining us today at this meeting along with Karen Borja to give us a report on complaints and investigations.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen. I am a complaint investigations manager for the unit. I'll be presenting alongside with Clarissa Serrato Chavez, my co-manager, and so we'll begin. On beginning of page 39, as you can see from quarter 1 to quarter 2, this actually includes the months of January to June. We have received a total of 408 complaints. 25 of these complaints were internally generated, and 383 were externally generated. Of those 408 complaints, 269 were individual schools, 60 received complaints were COVID-related, and we closed 56 of those complaints. And so I will pass it on now to Clarissa to discuss the other stats.
Hello, my name is Clarissa Serrato Chavez, and I'm also one of the complaint investigation managers. Today I want to, if you can go to page 40. Page 40, I do want to point out there is a typo on the header of complaints closed. It should, on the first chart, it should say quarter 1 and 2 for 2021. I just noticed that today. This first chart is a comparison of closures from this calendar year, January through June, with the previous 2 years, as you can see. The second chart on the bottom left represents number of closed complaints for each month. And then the chart to the right represents the case dispositions for 439 complaints that were closed during quarter 1 and 2. I have broken it down a tad bit more, and we'll be going over, so it's broken down, I think, now into about 14 categories, and I will be going over the categories. 8% of the case closures were discipline unit referrals. Once the case is referred, the discipline unit determines what further action will take place, whether it be a citation or a disciplinary action. 2% of the cases where compliance were obtained. 7% involved mediated settlement and was resolved by the school. 4% involved closed schools and were referred to STRIF. 10% were for non-jurisdictional referrals. 10% were referred to other agencies such as Office of Civil Rights, USDE, Department of Education, or an out-of-state agency. We might come across a complaint on a school that has no physical presence in California. 12% were closed as 12% of the closures were for schools where we determined they were exempt. Examples of this would be we had schools offering programs that were actually under 2,500. We've come across flight school complaints where the flight school did meet the exemption requirements under Education Code 94874. We also investigate complaints that arrive against schools that have previously received Bureau approval to be exempt to ensure that the school is not stepping outside of their exemption. Moving on to the next line, 4% were closed as duplicate entry. And some of this was due to our new database system where external users, as they were learning to use the system, were maybe submitting multiple complaints. Either it was done erroneously or purposely. And then we've also addressed that with the Connect, with the project management to prevent any duplicate closures. But in the beginning, we were getting, some duplicate cases coming in the door. And then once we determined same complainant, same school, same allegations, then we would decide if it was a duplicate entry or not. 7% were consolidated cases. And just to explain, consolidated cases, this occurs when we receive anonymous complaints for the same school with the same allegations. Then the manager with their staff will determine if those cases, if it's appropriate to consolidate the case with a main case that's moving forward. 28% were non-substantiated, no confirmed violation. This disposition is part of the new Connect database and has replaced the unsubstantiated disposition. So the description is slightly different. 9% after investigating the complaint, in 9% of the cases, we found insufficient evidence to confirm a violation. And then 3% were other closure reasons, such as withdrawn complaints or non-operational, that, we came across a school that's been non-operational for years. The next 3 case dispositions that are listed are related to state authorization contracted schools that I may also refer to as contracted schools. Authorization schools, 2% of the complaints were closed as mediated settlement. 4% unable to resolve, were closed as unable to resolve. This does not necessarily mean that the school wasn't willing to resolve. In some cases, the students rejected the offer or wanted something else. And we had one case during this reporting period that was referred to another agency during the reporting period. And these currently are the only 3 dispositions that exist for contracted schools. If you can go to page 41, the first chart on page 41 reflects that we were able to close 62% of the complaints within 90 days. And then the second chart on that page lists the top closure reasons for quarter 1 and 2. The top closure reasons were non-substantiated, no confirmed violation, consolidated case, not substantiated, no response from complainant, exempt under 2,500, and non-jurisdictional referrals to other agencies. I'm going to turn over the rest of our presentation to Karen, and she'll finish up with our pending and the remainder of our statistics. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, so we'll begin on page 42. This represents our pending caseload. As you can see, as of June 30th of 2021, we had 223 cases. And as of yesterday, August 25th of 2021, our pending cases are now at 266. Of the cases that are aged 2 to 3 years, 4 are being investigated and 1 is being monitored, pending an external investigation. The 5 cases aged 3 to 4 years are being monitored, pending investigation by a law enforcement agency. And on our last page, page 43, this represents student impact for the time period of January to June of 2021. Investigators' advocacy on behalf of students resulted in a total of $37,914 in refunds to students or their federal student aid account. So in conclusion, and we would like to thank our Complaint Investigations Unit for their flexibility and dedication to the Bureau during these unique times. With teleworking, our team has stayed focused, supported one another, and has successfully pushed through the challenges with positivity.
I also want to thank all of the staff that assisted with the configuration and testing of our new database, Connect. Also those that assisted with creating and gathering all the violations table that we have now updated into Connect. There was a lot of work that went into from our staff that took them away from their regular duties, and we couldn't have done this without everyone's help from our unit. So we're definitely grateful for everybody being a team player and assisting with this project. And that's it for our presentation. So we're open for questions.
Thank you both very much. Great job in your debut as presenters at an advisory committee meeting. Awesome job. So with that, I'll open the floor to the committee. If anyone has any questions or comments or like to discuss anything from Karen and Clarissa's report.
I had some questions. The first chart, which I don't remember what page number that is. Let's see where that is.
They start off on 39.
Yeah, I didn't make a copy of the revised version. That's why I'm not quite sure of the, because I'd already made my notes in the first one. Okay, complaints closed page. So I guess that's page 40.
Okay.
I am sure you've told me, or not you, but someone has told me before, but the headings are so similar, I never can keep it straight. So I'm hopeful that maybe you can revise the heading in the new database. Not substantiated, no confirmed violation, and not substantiated, insufficient evidence to confirm violation. What's the difference?
So the not substantiated, no confirmed violation pretty much means when the complaint arrived that it was not substantiated. For example, just to give you an example, a student may say that they were unjustly terminated. And then once we dive into the investigation and the school provides all this documentation that there was, repeated encounters, or there was counseling and so on, then the school has provided detailed information as to why this individual was terminated per se. And then we may determine that that would be like unsubstantiated, where in an instance where we've actually, done an investigation and we're looking into everything, but there was just not enough evidence to support a violation. So that is a difference. And I will look into the descriptions to see if there is a way, because, working with Connect, we can always enhance the system, and we can look into maybe changing the description just to make it more clear and transparent to everyone.
So if you have a complaint, like you mentioned, the first example, a student says, I was unfairly dismissed, and the school provides you a bunch of documentation. At that point, is that when it's closed, or do you go back to the student and provide them the documentation and get their response before you close it?
Normally, we would be speaking to the student as well. Every case is different, but normally the student is also providing documentation on their end as well. We always ask for it from both sides so that we can compare. And our staff, they always communicate with both the complainant and the respondent or the school itself. So it's not where, we would just take it for granted and then call it a day. We would definitely, be working and explaining and then reach back out to the student, because they might have something else that wasn't shared in the beginning.
Right, got it. Okay, very good. And then the state authorization contracts, are those the ones where the school agrees to be under the Bureau's authority?
Correct. They're technically exempt schools, and they contract with the Bureau so that we can handle their complaints.
Mm-hmm. And are those, I don't quite understand why they aren't, why there aren't categories to describe how those, you said those were the only 3 possible outcomes?
Well, right now, those are the only 3 case dispositions for contracted schools. And we have been under discussion. It's just, really taking the time to analyze everything and determine, well, which closure reasons would be more appropriate? Like, do we need to expand so that they're not just lumped into these 3 and then, there's no flexibility? So
right. Well,
it's definitely something that we want to look into, and we've started the discussions. It's just, taking the time to be very, strategic, and we don't want to just create dispositions that really don't apply. So we really need to look at the overall, like, what are typical ones, or what are some that would be best for dealing with the contracted schools that would also provide more transparent dispositions.
Right, since they're under the Bureau approval, even if it's by contract, they still have to comply with the same laws, in essence, that everybody else does. So you could still have the same issues for many of the things, I would think. So I'm glad you're looking into that, because I think it would be helpful to know for those, what the disposition is, more specifically. On the complaint investigation statistics page, you have the top 5 closure reasons. Those have generally been this kind of thing, which really doesn't tell us the kind of complaints that are actually closed or dealt with because there was a problem. These are all things where, for some reason, there was no complaint handled, in essence. I think it would be helpful in the future, if that's going to be true generally, to have the top 10 closure reasons, so we can get a sense of those where there's actually an investigation and a determination what those reasons were. So that's something for future contemplation.
We can look into that, but also the case dispositions, pretty much it breaks it down as well. It does give you some of the information, but I mean, it's something that we can definitely look into.
Right. So, I mean, I'm thinking of the kind of thing where, they didn't provide the fact sheets, or the fact sheets were provided, but in your investigation, you discovered that they were misleading or inaccurate, or, there were representations made on enrollment that turned out not to be true. The reasons for the ones that were actually dealt with, what were those kind of
so for a situation such as that you're explaining, we would probably be issuing a violation. So we would be concluding our investigation and referring that to the discipline unit so that they can determine if a citation or disciplinary action would take place.
Right. So if that's, say, reason number 6, instead of, among the top 5, that would be nice to know. X percent were referred for, and I see you have that elsewhere, but just to kind of get it in that same chart, I think would be helpful. If it's not, every time you do a chart, it takes away your time for doing investigations, so I don't want to get too carried away with that. But
okay.
It can be. And then your there's one more question which I seem to have lost. All right. Well, I had another question which has completely lost my mind and I can't find it in my notes. So there you go. Thanks very much.
No problem. Thank you.
I've got a quick question, and Debbie, you might be the best person to help me with this. Is if we're contracting the exempt schools out and they're representing 12% of the complaints, how is that being contracted out? Are there enough fees coming to the Bureau for that process?
I think that just in terms of the fee conversation we had earlier, I think that is one of the issues that was discussed in that memo. So I think, I think basically all of our fees is something we've been looking at in terms of the sufficiency to cover the workload associated with them.
But do those exempt schools pay anything?
They do pay something. They pay $1,076. So there is a fee associated with us handling complaints for them in order for them to get their state authorization for federal Title IV purposes. But again,
okay,
like all of our other fees, all of the fees that are in statute are things that we've been looking at with respect to sufficiency and workload.
Okay, thank you.
Now that raises another question. So the ones that are listed here as exempt, even though they're exempt, the complaint handling authority for them.
So that is different. So I wanted to clarify that once I heard his question. The 12% that are exempt, those are schools that are not contracted with us. They're really exempt, and most of them will be because their program is under 2,500 majority of the time. So the contracted ones, these are schools that meet that requirement and they choose to contract. So the contracted, the state authorization contracts for review of complaints, I believe is under 94874.9 that speaks to that. And then there's where the fee, so they choose, because my understanding is that they require a third party outside mediator of their complaints under their accreditors. So they don't have to contract with us, but they choose to contract with us. And yes, it's only a little bit over $1,000. And then we would handle all their complaints regardless of the amount that are coming in the door. So we might receive 2 complaints for one school, or we might receive 10 complaints for one school. They still pay the same fee. And I guess it's a Title IV requirement.
Yeah, so just to further clarify, because this is one of the things I deal with this one a lot. You have institutions that are exempt under one of the exemptions that do not have oversight from the Bureau at all because they're exempt. And then you have independent institutions as defined by California law, which are nonprofit, degree granting, and accredited. So you have this independent institution group, and those institutions go through this pathway process that Karen and Clarissa are talking about, where they contract with the Bureau as their complaint provider because the federal state authorization rules say you must have as established state authorization, and that includes a complaint process. And so it is really because those institutions that are independent institutions under California law who are WASC accredited and therefore exempt from the Bureau, but need to be state authorized to get Title IV. Those are the institutions that they're talking about that pay the $1,076, and then the Bureau agrees under contract to handle their complaints. So that is really related to their ability to be state authorized for Title IV purposes, which is not really an issue for schools that are exempt under the Bureau, because most of those institutions that they mentioned, like the $2,500 cutoff, they're not Title IV, and in most cases they're not accredited either. So they don't need that state authorization complaint process. They can just be exempt. So that is, and you know, pardon me for jumping on that one, but it's just I've dealt with this one so much that I really do have this, but broken down in my head in a very clear way.
Thank you.
So maybe that's helpful.
And Clarissa, to be clear, then the bucket of nonprofits that are contracted for complaints, that is not articulated in anywhere in your charts, correct? Like there isn't any reference to how many complaints that subset of independent schools is generating.
You're saying as to how many have been received?
Correct. Yeah. Do any of your tables articulate this is how many complaints came?
They are not broken out, and that's something that I can look into.
Thank you.
I recovered the other question I had. You have the total of money refunded to students as a result of complaint investigations. I have a question for you. Suppose you're investigating a student's complaint and they say, you know, this teacher or whatever the thing is, in this classroom, this happened. And you're trying to verify, the school says, oh, no, it didn't. And you're trying to verify it. In the process of your investigation, you interview some other students in the same class and you find out, yep, they say the same thing. So then the student who complained is entitled to, let's say, a refund. Are you including in this statistic then a refund for everybody in that class, or just the student who complained, or the student and all of the witnesses you talked to who had the same complaint? Or is part of that goes over into further into investigation, and that amount of money recovered would show up elsewhere? Is
so I get what you're saying, and I think if it was something that we encountered where there was multiple students and we're actually obviously finding violations, then that case would be referred to the discipline unit for them to take further action and determine how to address, you know, if there were multiple students or one student and so on.
So any money they recovered would not show up here. That would show up, or hopefully would show up elsewhere.
Most likely it would be depending on how the citation or order of abatement was addressed, or if it went, you know, further to accusation, and then, you know, a decision was made on, you know, how they were going to compensate the students during that time.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Anyone else from the committee have questions or discussion requests relating to item 5G? All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you both again for your presentation and responses. And with that, we can open the floor to public comment on item 5G.
This is the moderator. At the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on agenda item 5G, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, this is the moderator. It appears we have one request for public comment. Give me one moment while I pull up the attendee list. Individual identified as Angela Perry. Angela, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I'm going to request to unmute your microphone now. All right, and you are unmuted.
All right, thank you so much, moderator. Thank you so much to everyone for that really interesting and helpful discussion. Thank you so much, Karen and Clarissa, for the helpful update. Since I have limited time, I will jump quickly to my thought, which was there was a comment earlier that was made about how every complaint handling process is different, which I am sure is absolutely the case. But it reminded me of something that I have thought several times during meetings, which is that it would be very helpful to students and to advocates to understand what that internal process for complaint handling looks like. What are the steps that the Bureau goes through? What should students expect? What are timelines that students can reasonably expect, so that they understand the process as they begin, and so that advocates can help them to be able to navigate that process. TCAS undertook some research last year on complaint systems nationally and looked at various state systems. And we found that unfortunately it is really common that students just don't know what those complaint processes look like internally. And I can say as an advocate that I don't have a super clear understanding of what all those steps are, whose hands touch all the complaints, and what that process is. So if it were possible to create some sort of guide for what that system looks like, and make that publicly available, I think that would be incredibly valuable, and would allow for some transparency in how these complaints are handled that I don't think is currently available. So that's just one thought that I wanted to share. But again, really appreciate these updates. I think really good questions were raised, and some great suggestions about how to break out data and take a look at various things, but just wanted to share that as one piece of feedback. Really appreciate, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to comment.
All right, this is the moderator, and it appears that was our only request for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
All right, the next item on the agenda is item 5H, licensing report. Open the floor to the Bureau for that update.
Good afternoon. My name is Ebony Santee, and I'm licensing chief with the Bureau. My report will start on page 45 for the committee members. Apologies, there's a mistake. It should be licensing application status as of July 1, 2021 for the fiscal year of 2021. As of July 1, we have received 1,054 applications. This includes 45 applications for full approval. 47 of those were institutions who wanted to be approved by means of accreditation. We've received 78 renewal for full approval schools and 75 renewals for institutions approved by means of accreditation. 212 applications were received for full approval changes. That can include both change in method, change in educational objectives, as well as change in ownership and so forth. We received 308 applications for changes for institutions approved by means of accreditation, and 258 were for verification of exemption. And lastly, 31 applications were received for out-of-state registration. As of July 1, we have 395 pending applications. Further breakdown of our oldest pending applications in the queue, and I did include some notes as suggested from last time. The oldest full app in the queue is actually still incomplete. They have until tomorrow, August 27th, to remit the remaining information requested, or that application will be abandoned. The oldest full application under review is currently with the Qualitative Education Unit. The institution indicated that they had sent a response by mail, and that was in the last 2 weeks. It's also important to note that that application wasn't considered complete until January of 2020. The oldest renewal application, full renewal application that we have in the queue does have discipline issues. There is action being pursued, which causes us to pause on approving that renewal application. Page 46 is the data that was discussed just now on page 45. So starting on page 47 are the number of schools and location types and approval types as of July 1. There were 963 mains, 359 branches, 513 satellites for a total of 1,833 locations. Of those, 411 were approved by means of accreditation, 519 were full approval, and there was 1 conditional and 32 provisional approvals. And as of May 1st, we have 69 approved out-of-state registrations. Are there any questions?
No questions, but I think that additional data is very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, this is Joseph Holt. I do have one question for you. Looking at the average of 420 days for the renewal of the full application or for full approval, and that's a renewal, so it's presumably an operating school. They've come up on their deadline to renew, they submit an application. And if the average is more than a year, what is the status of the school during that extended period of evaluation? They're under continued.
As long as the application is received before the expiration date, they are eligible to remain operating until that application is processed. That number has been significantly impacted because those renewal applications do funnel to the Quality of Education Unit, which, as you know, has also been impacted by the large number of changes, especially change in method due to COVID. So there's a number of variables affecting that number. However, again, if the institution in a timely manner, then they are able to operate during this processing time.
Thank you. So they're just carried over functionally then. And forgive me, I don't recall from previous years what was normal for that prior to this disruption of the last year and a half.
I don't know exactly. I can look that up for you. I mean, I would say it's somewhere between 8 months to a year, but there's so many variables that go into the completeness. If an institution has made any significant changes that have to be discussed through deficiency letters and so forth. But I know for this year, definitely the change applications that are also reviewed by the Quality of Education have made a significant impact on how quickly those are coming through. And they are a much smaller unit as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else on the committee have any questions or would like to discuss anything from Ebony's report? Thank you, Ebony. Yeah, fabulous as always. I will open the floor to public comment for line item 5H. Moderator, if you can open the floor, thank you.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on agenda item 5H, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, seeing no requests, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you very much. All right, that takes us to line item 5I, the Office of Student Assistance and Relief report, which I presume will be Scott.
Thank you, Kate. So this is Scott Valverde, Chief Office of Student Assistance and Relief, or OSAR. So I'll be going over, I believe it's pages 49 through 52 are the first series of charts which represent our activities in the last fiscal year, closing June 30th of 21. And then I will also, on page 53, be going over some early numbers from the fiscal year that just began. And then also on page 54, I'll be going over the chart highlighting our outreach efforts around AB 1346. And then I've got a couple verbal only updates on some recent closure activity as well that happened after our deadline to be able to draw down this data for the agenda. So that's kind of the plan. Starting with chart A on page 49, again, which covers the fiscal year that recently closed in its entirety. I'm pretty proud of the work there. You know, we did a total of 45 what we call informed choice outreach events last fiscal year during the heart of the COVID crisis. You know, to continue to do that many events and to touch that many prospective students and families and others interested in private post-secondary education, I think is, you know, my staff deserves a lot of credit for that, as well as our partners in continuing to provide these type of outreach opportunities in a virtual sort of environment. And so, you know, in addition to all the Cal TAP events with the California Department of Veteran Affairs, we also participated in the CalSOAP event. A couple of presentations we did in partnership with Natomas Unified School District on a couple of different topics, the Black College Expos and the National Association for College Admission Counseling spring event as well, which was all of which were converted from normal in-person events to virtual opportunities. So did a lot of training with our staff and sort of that delivery mode, and you know, did some WebEx training and just kind of fine-tune our content for those types of audiences in those types of environments. So we're pretty proud of that work. In the chart B, and we talked about this last time, I know, you see that we had significantly less actual scheduled closed school workshop events with students at a specific time and sort of virtual location. Obviously, that number of 3 events is significantly down from previous years. And again, it's just to a variety of variables there. Not as many schools closed permanently during COVID. There were a lot more temporary closures and you know, moves from you know, in-person instruction to online instruction, but not as many. Permanent closures was one. And then I think chart C speaks to the second part of that story, which is just our ability during this time with staff teleworking and et cetera, to do a lot more of our outreach content around closed schools through emails. We call these email outreach. Email often is just sort of the trigger in terms of, you know, we get rosters from schools that are closing and develop outreach messages, you know, customized to whatever the needs of the students are in that particular closure. Send out that information via email, and then that generally results in one-on-one appointments or email exchanges, other ways that we then connect with the student to help them with whether their questions be STRIF or closed school discharges or whatever, accessing the records, whatever the issue may be. So we did have, you know, once we started capturing that kind of like in the middle of the fiscal year this year, when we realized that just showing the workshops that we have done in the past would not really be representative of all the work we were doing. So we kind of made this change on the fly and still captured, looks like about 25 such instances where that's the way we provided outreach, which is kind of a segue before I move on to the next fiscal year chart into a discussion. For those of you who were in the meeting last time or read the meeting notes, you'll recall I talked about providing more granular student level data in these reports moving forward, like specifically in terms of the number of students on these rosters, the number of students who attend our events, the number of emails and calls that are generated as a result, and the number of STRIF claims. So we are working on that. It just basically was a timing issue why that's not included in the last 2 charts. We started and built all those data elements into our processes effective July 1. So again, with the tight timelines of, you know, our deadline to get this data drawn down and put into the agenda package and posted publicly, we weren't quite ready to, we didn't quite have enough time to sort of vet and figure out how to display that information and how to sort of capture it for you. Apologize about that, but we will definitely have that in future meetings. I'm committed to having that by the next meeting. And like I said, we do have a couple of more recent closures that happened after this data was drawn down, and just verbally, I'll give you kind of an idea of the type of information we will be providing in these reports moving forward. So again, moving on to page, the last chart on page 53, this is the current fiscal year. Again, as of July 27th, about a month ago, when we drew data down, 3 informed choice workshops, and it looks like about 6 outreach efforts at that point, and we've had several since. So that is that. I will go on to the next page, which is 54, and talk about our AB 1346 campaign. And then I'll go back and close with the information around the CEHE closures that happened recently and our efforts around that. So circling back to AB 1346, as all of you I think know, what AB 1346 did was expand the eligibility window or pathway, if you will, for former Corinthian students backwards in time, basically making a larger cohort of students eligible for reimbursement of their economic loss under STRIF, back from the date in 2014 to a date in 2010. So that was one of the things that AB 1346 did. The other thing it did was redefine, recreate the definition of economic loss for the purpose of STRIF eligibility. As it relates to that first change, one of the things that OSAR was charged with was developing an outreach strategy and campaign, if you will, to attempt to make students who could benefit from AB 1346 aware of that possibility. So we embarked in several different ways in terms of sending email messages with updated information, the updated application and the updated information around AB 1346 with some links to some of our resources, to a list of former Corinthian students that's representative of several different sources where we gathered that information subsequent to the Corinthians closure and OSAR coming online, to the tune of about 57,000 approximately emails that went out to that set of contact information. We also engaged in what is still an ongoing social media campaign as well. So routinely pushing out information on our social media pages, not only about just OSAR and STRIF and other hot button issues that are out there, but specifically highlighting 1346 and information for Corinthian students. We also partnered with CSAC, California Student Aid Commission, got another list of students that they were able to share with us in terms of being former Corinthian students per their records around the time period that was captured in AB 1346, who were Cal Grant applicants and or recipients, and that to the tune of another 41,000 contacts, unique contacts that we were able to reach out to. So total of about, almost 100,000, 98,000 or so emails that went out staggered over a period of time using our technology to be able to get that information out to those students. So there is some, I know this question came up in the last meeting, there was some duplication. I'm sure there's some duplication amongst the 41,000 being included within the 57,000 record contacts that we already had prior to that CSAC partnership. I've never done I have not done a specific line-by-line crosswalk. I do know that there was some duplication, but not much. It was a very robust number of what ended up being unique contacts. So what does that translate into? Well, I'm pretty, again, proud of my team and proud of their efforts to stay persistent and continue to follow up, continue to make contact with these students and sort of spread the word around AB 1346. So We received 625 phone calls, 600 emails, and 191 strict claims to date from the point in time where we really initiated this campaign. And on December 30th was the first set of emails that went out. So I would suggest that those are very likely, very likely 191 strict claims that would not have otherwise come into the Bureau if it weren't for this effort. Certainly 90% plus of that number we would have never seen, just based on the timeline. So I'm really happy about the success of that part of our outreach campaign. We also reached out to 177 claimants who had previously been denied or deemed ineligible under STRIF based on their initial submittal and the eligibility statute that was in place at the time, that for whom they would now potentially be eligible given the expansion of the eligibility window. And we reached out to them both email and in letters as well. So so we feel good about that. Also, I know the question that came up last time was, what will you continue to do? Is this sort of like a one-time, one-off? And the answer to that is no. We're definitely continue to explore ways to try to contact these students, given the fact that we do know this campaign has borne fruit in terms of 191 potential STRIF applicants that would have not otherwise known they could be eligible. So we know that there is some opportunities there that we're continuing to pursue with social media and using LexisNexis to try to attain new or alternate contact information, encouraging those who we do make contact with successfully to sort of spread the word with their peers. That's always, that sort of peer-to-peer word of mouth thing has always worked well in this space. So we're continuing to do that and just basically encouraging my team to sort of think out of the box about how we can continue to work on that area while we balance that with other priorities of OSAR. So that is kind of where we're at with the charts and the data. The two things before I turn it over to questions that I wanted to update you on, two recent efforts that again are not captured in these handouts just because of timelines, but I thought you'd be interested to know. We recently had the Center for Excellence in Higher Education closures nationwide that in the state of California impacted one Bppe approved school, which is the California College San Diego, that included one main and one branch location, as well as to a previous question I think David asked about, an online out-of-state school that had, as we found out, as the closure was sort of happening, a significant number of California students enrolled in that school as well. So we were able to obtain rosters, reach out to those students, and on the fly very quickly, this was an abrupt closure, unfortunately, able to set up two workshops. And we had 27 students attend. And again, this is all the sort of data that you'll have in the handouts for future events moving forward. That outreach effort and those workshops and the attendance of that workshops, et cetera, have resulted in about 95 emails that we've received from students to date, about 125 phone calls, and we've set up one-on-one appointments with students to go over their STRIF claims, 8 of those so far to date. I haven't received any STRIF claims yet, but that's not abnormal given the fact that the school just very recently closed and we're still working on this piece of the outreach. So that is the CEHE closures and California College San Diego. I may not have mentioned the out-of-state school with the California online students is Independence University, regulated out of Utah. And so we've worked with Utah to get some information about the access to those records, to Margaret's previous question about the need for documents for borrower's defense and closed school discharges, et cetera. All that that work has been applicable with that student cohort as well. So we've been working with them on that. And like I said, we did do workshops for those students as well. And then the last one, and then I'll open it up to questions. I know it's a lot of information in a short amount of time, but the other effort we're pretty happy about, long story here with a long history, but the Video Symphony closure, I believe it was in 2016. I know it definitely predated OSAR, has been an ongoing issue in terms of students' access to their records or lack of access to their records from that school. And there were several legal proceedings, including lawsuits and all kinds of stuff, and ultimately bankruptcy proceeding that led us to an opportunity through that bankruptcy court process to bring into our possession the student records for Video Symphony. So to the tune of 1,250 approximately physical student files that me and my staff went down to LA and took into the state's possession per that ruling of the bankruptcy court judge, and are in the process now of digitizing those records and making them available to Video Symphony students, many of whom have been frustrated in their attempts to get those records. And so we'll be doing some outreach around that I can talk about in the future as well. But I thought that was a good outcome from our efforts. So I will pause there or stop there and open up for any questions you might have.
Thanks, Scott. Does anybody on the committee have any questions or points of discussion about item I, Romanette I, sorry?
Yeah,
yeah, this is Margaret. Scott, but I'm going to start with the bankruptcy. I think that is terrific. I had that experience a number of times where when businesses close, they try to turn their customer records into an asset they can sell. And then if it was a fraudulent business or, not a reputable business, they sell it to somebody else even less reputable, and the people get dinged again. So I'm delighted you were able to get those records. Just a curiosity was, how did that happen? Were you represented by the Attorney General in the bankruptcy, or how did that happen?
No, I don't recall actually exactly how the connection between the bankruptcy attorneys and our enforcement manager at the time, chief at the time, who, as Debbie updated earlier, is no longer with us. So if Beth were here, I'm sure she'd be able to answer that question. I know that enforcement was working with the Deputy Attorney General and the bankruptcy attorneys. And so when that became a question to us, whether the state was interested in doing that, then, there was a motion filed, explaining our authority to have those records, et cetera. But I do know that the DAG was involved in that.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, I would just say, I think that's the kind of thing where that forms a template for future cases. And I think if you have a state agency like the Bureau going in and asking for those records, that's something that you're likely to get, and that's a really big boon. And if you've done it once, you've got a template for doing it in the future. So that is really terrific. I wanted to ask, on the emails that you sent out for the Corinthian students, I'm not asking you to prepare a report or get statistics, but do you have a sense of how many of those bounced back as not reachable?
So you know what, I do have that, but I don't have it handy. It was a pretty significant percentage. I don't have it handy though. I believe it was less than 50%, but it was a significant number where we got bounce backs. I think we were a little bit more successful on the ones that went out through the CSAC listservs, but we do have the analytics on it. I'm sorry, I just don't have it handy. Like I said, that really what that is generating is our work around, like I said, those secondary efforts through LexisNexis, trying snail mail if email doesn't work, social media, et cetera, et cetera.
I just wanted to understand.
It's dated, and it's certainly a lot of those have old email accounts. So it was a significant percentage were bounced back.
Right. That's close enough for me. That's what I figured is, 50% or more is not unusual. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. I just was on the BPP website, and not on the OSAR part, but just on the regular BPP website, there is a page that talks about how to choose which school is right for you. You may want to take a look at that, Scott, because it seems like it needs some OSAR input. I think it's pretty outdated, and it's talking about diploma mills, but not much else as far as things that you need to look out for. Another thing related to that, I would hope that the OSAR folks would be able to work with the complaint folks. I have been disturbed by the continuing high number of complaints that seem to be out of jurisdiction. And it seems to me it would be helpful if in OSAR, in its presentations, and maybe you're doing this, and I know it's not going to affect everybody, but had a good portion on here are some violations of law you should be aware of, or here are some rights you have under the law. If these things happen, these are violations and you should file a complaint, so that they know what kind of things actually would make a complaint under the Bureau. I just think that's something maybe to start talking about, to see if there's some way that students can get a better sense of what the Bureau might be able to help them with. And then the third thing I was going to mention is, I think I've talked about this before, and I hope I'm not repeating myself and you've already told me the answer, but on your online events, first of all, are those ever so filled that you can't have more people in them, or do you have sufficient capacity for as many people as want to join them?
We've never had a capacity issue. We have all offered multiple sessions for the same school or the same closure, but it's only been based on just the needs of the students or the requests of the students, or just the convenience of offering different times. But it's never been based on a capacity issue.
Great. Well, then what I would ask is if you could include in your, maybe send out a notice to committee members with a listing of the upcoming events, so that if we want to sit in on those, we could.
Sure.
Maybe they're on the website and I've missed it, or maybe they ask you to identify your school or something like that, so it really wouldn't fit us. But if there's a way that we could have information about that so we can sit in, that would be terrific. Other than that, thanks very much, Scott. I appreciate all the information.
No problem, Margaret. And just back to one of your previous comments, I just wanted to share that we were thinking right along with you. In fact, we actually, and it has been a little bit of a time now, so I do appreciate the suggestion, because we may want to refresh this, but we did actually embark on a specific project where we pulled a random and fairly large sampling of student complaints that have been filed with the Bureau to help us inform the development of our initial outreach content around like potential red flags and possible issues, and just to sort of inform real, not suspected things that other students who may be sitting in that prospective student's shoes have experienced in the past. So that we so we definitely did do that as we were standing up OSAR and standing up our outreach content. It probably wouldn't hurt, especially with the new system. I think information will be even that much more accessible to sort of do a refresh on that. But yes, we have already done what you suggested earlier.
Okay, great, thanks.
Hey, Scott, David Weiss. Silicon Valley is kind of a new name I'm seeing on here, and it's got more STRIF claims received, I guess, this calendar year. I know it's not, I shouldn't say calendar, this fiscal year. That's the big nonprofit that existed a while back, right?
I don't know how. It was a big nonprofit. It was a large closure. I don't know the business structure of the school when they were open, but yes, it was a large closure. It's on the large impact report.
Yeah, but you've got 800 claims still pending.
Yep.
And you've paid out $5 million. It's $18,000 a claim versus everybody else's a fraction of that. Why are the payments so big for Silicon Valley?
They were expensive programs, and most of those students were cash payers. So a lot of times in other closures with comparable comparably priced educational programs. Often the STRIF payout hasn't been as much because they were Title IV schools and they were eligible for loan discharges, et cetera. And so a lot of these were cash pay. So, and they were not inexpensive programs.
Were these, as I recall, a lot of them were non-U.S. residents?
Correct. That's also true.
So they never paid into the STRIF to begin with.
I think Lisa may be able to help me. Was that was the entirety of their enrollment likely during the time where we were not collecting STRIF? I don't know the answer to that question.
No, I think it was only California residents paid into STRIF,
yeah, that's
correct?
true too. Yeah, that's true also. But I don't think any students were paying into the STRIF at that time, is what I'm saying. But yes, you're right.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. It's not just California students, but it's any students enrolled in a
resident program.
So if the students were here in the state on campus, then they are included in STRIF.
So they would have paid into STRIF. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
And I think yeah, there will be more on the STRIF presentation about where we're currently at with that school as well. So.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions for Scott before we open the floor to public comment?
I would just say really quick, it looks like we need to increase the STRIF calc because that Silicon Valley is going to wipe out quite a bit of STRIF. So if we need to increase what our students are paying, you know, and give the schools enough notice to make it happen, that would be good.
Thanks, David. Anyone else? Okay. Moderator, can you open the floor to public comment on item 5I, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on agenda item 5I, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, this is the moderator. It appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. So just a quick housekeeping because it is getting later here. What we're thinking of doing is having this last item, which is 5J. We'll have the presentation on that item, and then we will take a short lunch break because we probably have at least another hour worth of stuff to cover between items 6, 7, and 8. So we'll have we'll do J and then we'll take a break. David, what time did you need to take off?
Yeah, I'll probably take off after this topic then.
Okay.
Okay.
And I think based on what Richie said, we still have a quorum, so we'll just proceed with the post-lunch portion without you, David. Okay.
This is Lee. I'm also going to have to leave at least for a short period of time at about 2:15, but hopefully I'll be there for part of it, and then back afterwards, about 30 minutes.
Okay.
Kate, I was noticing in the instructions at the beginning of the materials, it seems to say that that if we don't have a quorum, we can still go ahead and discuss things, which is different from what in the past I think the information has been. But you might want to take a look at that during break. But I think we're okay as long as we're not taking a position.
Where were you getting that from, Margaret?
I believe it's on the very first page of the packet is where I saw it.
Okay.
When it describes what the procedure is. Yeah, so it would be page 1. It's the last item on that page. Discussion action may be taken on any item on the agenda, so forth and so on. In the event of a quorum is unable to attend, the committee is unable to maintain a quorum or unable to maintain a quorum, members present may, at the chair's discretion, continue to discuss items from the agenda and make recommendations to the full committee at a future meeting.
Gotcha.
This is Lynn Wynn, counsel to the Bureau. Let me take a few moments during the break and this next presentation to look at that and then get back to you.
Thanks, Lynn.
Sure.
And I think actually, even if Lee and David are gone, and Richie can correct me, I think we still have enough people anyway, but it'd be good to have that clarified. So with that, why don't we do item 5J? If the Bureau wants to discuss the STRIF report, and then we'll take a break after that.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Yvette Johnson, and I'm the Administrative Chief for the Bureau. Today, I'll be going over the numbers for the Student Tuition Recovery Fund student applications. In your packets, beginning on page 56, you have a comparison chart of statistics for the 2021 fiscal year and the current 21-22 fiscal year, as far as the receipt of STRIF applications. In the first box, you have the number of STRIF claims received. In the 2021 year, we received a total of 1,337 claims. And so that was averaging about 111 claims per month. And this fiscal year, we have received 50 claims. And keep in mind, this report is, so that was just for 1 month, pretty much, because this report is as of August 2nd, 2021. In the next section, you have the number of STRIF claims closed. In 2021, we averaged closing about 70 claims per month. And in that section, we have the number of claims that were approved. And I'm really going to focus on what we're doing this year with the 21-22. And so far this year, we have approved 16 claims for payment. We have 4 claims that were deemed ineligible, 2 claims that were denied, and right now we're still working through the unable to contact, so we don't have any listed as unable to contact yet. For current STRIF claims, these are the claims in the STRIF universe. We have in queue, we have 810 claims, and in queue means that these claims have not been assigned to an analyst yet. For analyst review, we have 160 claims, and this means that the claims have been assigned to an analyst and they're currently working those. We also have waiting for student response. Right now we have 196 of those claims, and waiting for the student response means that the claim came in incomplete. Therefore, we have reached out to the student to gather more information so that we can continue processing the claims. And in waiting for student response, just letting you know that we do reach out to the student on multiple occasions. We do email, snail mail, telephone calls, whatever we can do to try to reach the student based on the information they've provided in their application. And we send out 30, 60, 90-day letters to those students as well. If we're not getting any contact from the contact information provided by the student, we do go to LexisNexis and see if we can find any updated information for that student. And we'll resume trying to contact them. Analysts first review complete. We have 180 claims in that section. And that is where the analyst has completed their initial review of the claim. They've worked it, they've made a recommendation, and it's gone to management for review. But this section also includes the going back and forth between the analyst and the manager. So if the analyst has received a claim and they either don't agree with the recommendation or there needs to be further research done, then those items are in this portion of the report as well. So right now in the total STRIF universe of claims, we have 1,346 claims. The next section is the STRIF claims that have been approved for payment. So far this year, within the month of July, we have paid out $146,900.22 in STRIF claims. And we currently have another, and in the next section shows the number of STRIF claims that are pending payment with the State Controller's Office, and we currently have 55 claims over there awaiting payment. If you go to the bottom of page 56, you'll see the current fund balance for the STRIF, and we're currently at $15,751,227. And then below that, you have a historical account of the fund. Okay, on page 50, does anybody have any questions on that first page? On page 56, does anyone have any questions? Okay. On the next page, page 57, we have the listing of the large impact closures. The first section, the large impact closures, shows what's going on with the closures this fiscal year. And the second portion of the page shows the historical impact of the large school closures. And as you can see, with the current large impact closures, we've only received claims from Heald schools, Heald students, and Silicon Valley. A lot of the other schools, because the closure it's been such a long time since the closure, dating back to 2015, 16, 17, except for Corinthian colleges, students would no longer be eligible to file STRIF claims for reimbursement because the 4-year time has passed, in which they have the ability to submit their STRIF application. And so just to comment on something that David Weiss said earlier about raising of the STRIF assessment, I just want you to know that we are currently and continuously monitoring the STRIF as well as doing the comparison with the number of STRIF claims that we've received. So we will definitely keep everyone apprised of the ongoings, the going-ons rather, and we will definitely, if there is a change in the fee structure for the assessment, we will definitely give the schools enough time to make the necessary changes.
Everyone will very much appreciate that. Does anybody have any? I'm sorry, Yvette, were you wrapped up?
I'm done.
Okay.
Yes, I'm done.
Is there anyone on the committee or that would have any questions for Yvette or have any discussion points on this part of the report?
This Margaret, I have one question on the, I guess that's page 57. In the second to the last column, in the last chart, it says dollar amount approved for payment. And then the next column says educational credit dollar amount paid. Is that this? I mean, that's the same as the dollar amount. It's just that what has been approved versus what has been paid out. It had different descriptions, and that's why I was not, unsure why it had a different description.
Yeah, so the educational credit is for those students that part of their education was paid for by a third party, So if they choose to go to another school, then they can take that same that same group of money, such as grants and other payments, and use that towards their education in another school.
Okay, so it is a different thing from the column before it.
Correct.
I see. So in the column before, it says dollar amount approved for payment. That's approved for payment to the student directly.
Correct.
And the last column has those amounts have actually already been paid, but only for those who are taking their credit to a different school.
Correct.
Okay. It might be helpful if those two were equivalent, if they were either both amounts that had been approved for payment or amounts that had been paid for the appropriate thing, if you follow me.
I don't.
Okay, the second to the last column, those have been approved for payment to students directly, but the students haven't yet received their checks, correct?
No, this is what's already been paid. The second to the last column is what's been paid.
Okay, then maybe just change the heading to say dollar amount paid.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? The last column says amount paid, but the second to last says amount approved. So sometimes it takes the treasurer a while to get the money out. So I thought that was what that was trying to indicate.
Okay, I can do that.
Hello, this is Joseph. I have a question. In regards to, still on page 57, footnote 2, and the Corinthian colleges, Heald, Wildtech, and Everest, there's a large number of pending claims awaiting a decision on borrower defense or BDR applications. As you know, in July, the department acted, about a month and a half ago now, they acted to unilaterally, they surrendered basically an appeal lawsuit and have forgiven those loans, or in the process of forgiving those. So that issue has been resolved. I'm curious on what you're doing in terms of an update and what the next steps would be for those pending claims.
And those are, we are actively working with the students, and as soon as we can get their information from them, and I don't want to misspeak, but Scott has been working with the Department, Scott and Debbie have been working with the Department of Education as well. And we're hoping that we can get some type of list where we can compare what's being paid out by the Department of Education so that we can help resolve the claims on our end. Because unfortunately, we can't determine what the total economic loss is until we know the amount that those loans, their loans that's being forgiven.
Right, understood. And so in our next meeting, it would be good to hear about that, in that update. And then a related adjacent question is ITT. The Department of Education actually announced today or yesterday that they're doing a block loan forgiveness for ITT Tech students that were impacted as well. We have very few claims pending from that closure. And looking through the table, there are a disproportionately high number of denials. I'm curious if you have any color around why half of the ITT Tech strip claims were denied when there's none of the other colleges on this list approach that percentage of denials.
I don't have that information offhand. I'd have to look into it.
I'm going to go back to the, I'm sorry. I don't know. Are you done? Okay. Just going back to that Silicon Valley College, you know, that big cash pay, you know, with 800 still pending, it looks like they're still, you know, still receiving some this year. You know, at 18,000 a payment, you're looking at about, assuming they all are good, that's about $14 million worth of STRIF payments there. That's going to wipe out STRIF pretty quickly.
Yes.
So if we know it's coming, just give us a heads up.
Right, and that's what as I stated earlier, we're monitoring it and we're working internally to figure out the next steps.
And okay, and then mainly because I just find it entertaining. Oh, sorry, you got to warn these people about these nonprofits. This is dangerous. I got Margaret to laugh. Between the Dream Center and Silicon Valley, I mean, that's where the exposure
Of course, David, you have to admit that they were for-profits that became nonprofits, generally speaking, or so-called nonprofits. That's the issue.
I don't even know the history of Silicon. I really
I don't know Silicon either, but the Dream Center, that was what happened there.
Well, and then you've got Healed that used to be a nonprofit and became a for-profit. So what goes around comes around, I guess.
Does anybody else have any other questions or points of discussion on item J? Right, great. Thanks, Yvette.
I would just seriously, I would say, I think that that does point to an issue that we've been seeing in the recent years is for-profit colleges that are trying to escape the stricter regulations, claiming to become nonprofits. So it's absolutely an area we need to keep our eye on.
Thanks, Margaret. Moderator, can you open the floor to public comment on item 5J?
This is the moderator. At the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, seeing no requests, would you like me to go ahead and close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, everyone, it is 1:34.
Madam Chair?
I'm sorry, what was that?
This is Lynn Wynn. I'm just getting back to you on your
hi,
question
Lynn.
about
I was
the
just going to
quorum.
ask you. There you are.
Oh, yeah. Hi. So it turns out we will have a quorum, even if 2 of the committee members leave. So we're okay on that point.
Great. Thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to suggest we take a break until 2 o'clock. If that works for everybody, that gives you about 25 minutes to grab a bite to eat and stretch your legs. And then we should be able to, since we'll have a quorum either way, if Lee has to leave and doesn't get back before we're done, we'll still be okay without her and David. So if everyone is okay with that, we can break now and be back at 2 p.m. And we'll see you then.
All right. Good seeing everybody. Sorry I have to leave. Bye-bye.
Thanks, David. Bye.
Hi, David.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will be back at 2 p.m.